95.7 The Game.
Oh, excuse me? Hey-oh. Good morning, Bay Area. I'm Evan Giddings. That's Dan Devone. Ken Luttrell behind the glass. Dude, it's already 9:01 and we're pump faking each other because I gotta say, just looking around the Bay Area last night, we got college football starting. We got the NFL starting this upcoming week. Yay! The Niners got their players locked in line outside of one big one named 71. But Dan Devone, it feels like things are finally starting to come into play. So before we jump all over each other, how you doing, my man?
I'm well. You're right. Now it suddenly feels like fall is in the air. Everything's intact. Giants suck, but I don't know if we necessarily need to detail that.
Whoa. First and foremost, you didn't see that their playoff odds improved?
Oh, wow. Come on, man.
It went from 1.1 to 1.3%.
How many games left in the season? 16, 15? They basically got to go like 14-1. They got to run the table.
They got to run the table and hope that everyone else falls off a cliff. Yeah, exactly. There we go. There's your Giants content for the day. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone rocking with you 9 to noon as always on 95.7 The Game. Look, I think there's a lot of different things that we can get into over these next 3 hours. I think there's some NBA stuff I want to run by you specifically with Steph Curry. We got to talk about our puff piece. Apparently, the people are tuned in to a gripping and riveting conversation from a couple weeks ago. We got to get into some of Dan Devone's favorite personalities that have been, I don't know, like brought back to life apparently by college football. You're a big Johnny Manziel fan. I know you got thoughts on what Pat McAfee did last week. But before we get into all the fun stuff, Dan, we do have to do some of the nitty-gritty, and that is get your thoughts on what the news was 2 days ago, which is the 49ers finally bringing an end to this entire saga of Brandon Aiyuk potentially being or not being a Niner. He is, and he will be for the next 4 years, getting 120 M's.
I'm just going to lay down an edict right now. I refuse. I feel like I need the podium, like I need to be at the RNC or the DNC, the Democratic National Convention.
Just going to go Steve Kerr on us?
One of those things where I just want to captivate everybody's, on both sides of the aisle, everybody's attention. That I, the kahuna, Dan Devone, refuses to talk any more contract with one Brandon Aiyuk. Can't do it. Remember Mike Singletary back in the day? Can't do it when it was Vernon Davis. Won't do it. I don't want to hear about who won, who lost. Did the 49ers pay too much? The $30 million a year puts them in this bracket. I cannot do it. I mean, if you want to call, if you want to message, you got to direct all those things to my man, Ev. Ev, I'm sure, would be more than happy to pull that back and go blow for blow with you. I am done. It is over. Now we can talk football. Now we can talk about him lined up on the outside against Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed or whoever it is, and we can get into X's and O's and talk some damn football because it ain't my money at the end of the day, and let's just tee it up and play ball. I do not, and I cannot talk about that contract any longer.
Well, it is funny because there's a couple of details that leaked out about the contract yesterday, Dan, that I do want to dig into.
Oh, see? Well, Ken, are you doing anything for the next hour? Because you and Ev can have at it, man. No, talk to him.
I think I'm just going to do anything possible to push your buttons for these next 3 hours. No, but seriously, though, I think, all right, so you're tired of talking about it. But
well, let's get it out of the way. Who won on that thing? I mean,
I don't really care who won, to be honest. I mean, the player, all right, he got $120 million. Yeah. I feel like that's a win no matter how you slice it, no matter how long you're getting paid for, what the guaranteed money is. But basically, it essentially comes down to a 3 years, $76 million investment. Like, that's the guaranteed money. That's what Aiyuk is. That's what he's made for himself. And then the Niners, have an out after 3 years. I don't know, Dan. Was there any part of you, though, that wondered why it took so long? And why we had to talk about it for as long as we did?
I think Brandon Aiyuk, as I understand it, that same deal was on the table August 10th? Reportedly?
August 10th, August 12th, August 13th. That to me is the PR game. If you're talking about trying to win a deal, that is, to me, I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's correct. I'd like to think that Adam Schefter and Diana Rossini of The Athletic are two individuals that are professionals and, trustworthy news sources. But that is the Niners trying to basically say that this deal was something that Aiyuk wouldn't give into. That basically, like, we stood our ground and that we didn't lose. To me, that is them trying to tell us that they didn't lose the deal, which is something about this contract. If there's anything that I don't care about this contract, it's who won and who lost.
When you think about it, in this offseason, there are two franchises that have been really similar as far as dealing with their players. And I would never associate John Lynch, who I think is a good CEO at the end of the day. He toes the line. He's the adult in the room. Kyle Shanahan can be a bit emotional. But really, when you think about it, as pragmatic and as logical as the 49ers and as smart as their front office can be, they and the Dallas Cowboys were really similar in the way they handled their players this offseason. And Jerry Jones, to me, is a buffoon. I've said to you repeatedly, he's a smart businessman. I take that back. I mean, he's printing money.
Do you think he remembers that?
It may be an article tomorrow. Just stay tuned.
Oh, yeah. we got to figure out who this ghostwriter is for Saturdays on the game. If you're tuned in right now, call in. I don't know what kind of software he's using to transcribe all this stuff. I mean, the amount of junk that comes out of our mouth.
Yeah.
I don't know how he figures it out. But
I think the Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers are really similar in the way they handled their players. CeeDee Lamb came in just days before Brandon Aiyuk. Dak Prescott is still out there, and so is Trent Williams. And it's just peculiar because I think, and I give Lynch and company a lot more credit than I do that of Jerry Jones when it comes to handling your business, so to speak. But it's the Detroits, it's the Philadelphias that lock up their players well before any of this nonsense. So I'm just curious, from a Niners perspective, who are just so smart about everything else, why they are so similar like that of the Dallas Cowboys, who I do not think are very smart when it comes to Jerry Jones and handling these sort of things. But yet the two mirror one another when it comes to signing players and having it take this long to do it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, look, we had Brian Baldinger on yesterday morning of the NFL Network, and here's what he had to say when asked. I asked him personally. I was just like, dude, who won this deal?
I believe that everybody wins. John Lynch said he wanted to keep Brandon Aiyuk. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan never wanted to lose him, but he understands the business side of things. I think the winner of the deal, honestly, are the 49ers and everything that goes with it, whether it's Jed York, 49er fans, whether it's Brock Purdy. The 49ers win because not every team can figure out how to structure these deals where you can keep all of your great players. Most teams can't do it. Most teams don't have the wherewithal or the ability to do it. The fact that they drafted well in key spots and they've been able to keep those players, that's a testament to the 49ers and the front office.
Well, that's true. They've been able to keep just an unbelievable amount of talent on this roster, and they've been willing to pay for it. Like in total cash, they will have paid close to $350 million for 2024. That's tops in the NFL. To compare with the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys, I think, will be spending, assuming they don't invest in Dak Prescott, the lowest amount of cash in the NFL. So Jed York and the Niners have put their money where their mouths are. And the one thing that I do have, I don't know, just a sense of, Dan, is that this is not the last time that they can do that, but that the train eventually will come to a halt if and when they pay Brock Purdy his massive sum of money. So I'm glad that they paid Brandon Aiyuk because I think he keeps the Niners at a really, really high level. I think he's one of the top 10 wide receivers in football. Last year, he was a top 5 receiver, statistically speaking. But it does align the Niners for a last dance. Like this is their last run with this current group of ridiculously talented players. And that's why there's more importance now in this season, perhaps, than ever before. And that's saying a lot for a team that's been to 4 NFC championship games the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think this is them saying this is the last time we can do this because you'll go after Brock Purdy, and most likely you're going to sign Purdy, whatever that number is, $55, $60 million, but you're not bringing back Talanoa Hufanga, and you are not bringing back Charvarius Ward, and you're not bringing back Diamador Lenore, and you may not bring back Deebo Samuel. So this is it in terms of signing everybody because you just simply can't afford it. There's just not enough money in the till to go around. So this is sort of like Sean McVay a couple of years back where you just push all your chips in the middle of the table and saying, we're living for today. I don't want to hear about, can we afford this player next year? There's no guarantees that any of us will be here tomorrow, let alone next year. Super Bowls are hard to come by. They've been so elusive for the 49ers as much, as much grief as I give Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys, it's been a while. It's been a minute since the 49ers. They've been to Super Bowls, but they haven't won one since the 1990s as well. So when your window's ajar and you have an opportunity, the hell with everything else. Just go for it today. And I think at the end of the day, that was sort of the collective mentality.
Well, and just financially speaking, like this Brandon Aiyuk deal is essentially a 3 for $76. I mean, that's what he's guaranteed. And the Niners have an out in 2027, which I think is interesting because that's about the time that Purdy's big money is going to kick in. Assuming he gets paid, Brock Purdy this year will make, I don't know, $965,000 in his, 2-bedroom apartment in East San Jose, or wherever he's living. And next year, no matter what he signs for, he's going to make about $1.1 million. Yep. Maybe he'll be able to get himself a third bedroom, maybe let one less roommate. And then that's when the big payday kicks in. 2026, maybe 2027 is when the big cap numbers start to come in. And that's around the time that Brandon Aiyuk might be off the books. So the Niners have, I think, done a pretty nice job of, no matter who they've signed, of aligning these deals to their liking. So I think Brandon Aiyuk, again, not to go back to winners and losers, I think they both won because Brandon Aiyuk got the money that he wanted. I think he also got the respect that he wanted as one of the 5 $30 million AAV receivers in the NFL. He wanted elite, top-tier wide receiver, won money. He got the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. He's making $30 million, which Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, St. Brown, and A.J. Brown are all making. He's in that group, so he gets the respect. And the Niners also have been able to configure it to an extent where even if this is a deal that goes south, which is possible. I don't know. Maybe Brandon Aiyuk has already played his best football. But even if it goes south, they've also set themselves up safely to get out of this deal at about the time they're going to have to pay their most important player.
When you talk about Brock Purdy's contract, that's really why we're at where we're at, because the very unique opportunity to have a quarterback with his potential and his talent level to be under team control on a rookie deal that's less than $1 million. Think about how rare that is. Think about how different it would be if it was any other quarterback. You're not signing any of these guys. And that's why when people want to get into the conversation of, well, he's not a top-tier quarterback. He's not as good as Patrick Mahomes. I can't even put him in the tier 2. I think Mike Sando in the Seattle Times came out with his quarterback tiering, and everybody who spends so much time and dividing the room as to whether he's good or legitimate or worthy of the $50 million or $60 million, is he a system quarterback? Who the hell cares? You have a talented quarterback who can execute Kyle Shanahan's offense to a T that is coming in on a rookie deal as Mr. Irrelevant. That's allowing you to do all of this stuff. Brock Purdy is where this all begins and ends. The fact that Brock Purdy is on the cheap for the next 2 years is why you have Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams and all of these other players and an opportunity to go for a Super Bowl. So just think how silly it is wasting your time on whether or not he's as good as Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert or fill in the blank. As long as he's good enough with what it is that you're able to bring back. Here's the other thing I would say when you talk about how both sides won, and Baldinger talking about how the 49ers as well as Brandon Aiyuk won. That's true maybe right now, but if they get off to that slow start, they lose to the Jets, they start 1-3.
Even if Aiyuk plays poorly, let's say they beat the Jets, but Aiyuk has 1 catch or 2 catches for like 7 yards.
This will all resurface. And so this idea that, everybody's happy, the fact that he's into camp so late, that this thing has been hanging around the locker room, and things have been sort of squirrely between the two, and you get off to a slow start, and maybe some of these losses early on in the season cost you that number 1 seed, well, you can look back to these negotiations and saying that's where we screwed ourselves.
888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone with you on 95.7 The Game, taking you up until noon here on Saturdays, as always. If you want to get in on the conversation, again, 888-957-9570. Shout out to our YouTube and Twitch chat, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, the Xfinity Mobile text line. Feel free to chime in. Be happy to read any comments, get your calls on the air if you want to get in on it. I mean, to me, the question now is, what now? With not necessarily just Brandon Aiyuk, but with the San Francisco 49ers. Where has your mind shifted as a fan? Is it squarely 9 days away, Monday night, Levi's Stadium, 5:15 kickoff, Aaron Rodgers, the New York Jets? What matters to you right now? Does it matter that a side won or lost? Does it matter how the contract is structured? Does it matter that Brock Purdy's contract is looming over this entire thing? Does it matter that these things might linger during the season? Does it matter that Trent Williams is still not here at this point and that, according to Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, that they're not particularly close? Is that something that I guess I was curious, Dan, yesterday. I was with Shasky the past 2 days, but I was curious to see once the deal was signed for Aiyuk, if people's ire would be transferred in a sense to Trent Williams. I just look at him as like a package deal almost, because I feel like the big fella is going to be in here one way or another, and they're going to, if they found a way to get the Aiyuk deal done, I just feel like inevitably 71 is going to be in the house. And if there's a position and a player that needs less of a ramp-up period than anyone, I think it's probably Trent.
Yeah, I think there's a collective sense of confidence that this is going to get done. And the 49ers just simply are not that stupid. They're not going to go into a season against the Jets and that defensive line without Trent Williams. They know that. I mean, if you're going to lock up Brandon Aiyuk and you're going for your Super Bowl right now, well, it just doesn't make sense not to get Trent Williams in camp. So he'll be here. And I think all of us sort of work under that assumption. I think that now it makes sense. This looks like a team, and we'll see. You have to stay away from injuries. I think the defense is really sort of a question mark in certain ways on paper. Tremendous players, and we can get into Nick Sorensen and company. But now it looks like a Super Bowl team. Again, do they get there? Who the hell knows? But now it all makes sense, because the idea of, and the conversations that have sort of dominated our show over the last couple of months, that we were going to cobble together this other wide receiver position with Jacob Cowling and a Pearsall, or maybe a Chris Con. I mean, we were trying to convince ourselves of something that just was inferior. And now that Aiyuk's on one side of the field, Debo in the slots, Jennings, you got Kittle lined up at a tight end, McCaffrey set up behind Brock Purdy. Now it looks like that team that everybody envisioned that can make another run into Super Bowl.
It's funny you brought up the wide receiver room, because this was something that I think it was Matt Barrows of The Athletic who was talking about. But one of the reasons why Shanahan and Lynch, I'm not sure if you heard them on Wednesday, this was before Aiyuk signed. It was before the practice that he was expected to be at and then wasn't. And I think it kind of preceded really the final negotiations. But they sounded pretty pissed. They sounded pretty pissed at where Brandon Aiyuk was or was not. And one of the reasons, Dan, I believe, and I know it might be a stretch, but I think it was because Aiyuk might have cost them a player. Like, Aiyuk was on the roster on cut day, and he was not practicing, and he was not in camp. So they kept him on the 53-man, which also meant that they kept 7 wide receivers. This is a team that generally has 5 active on game day. So by doing that, someone like your 6th-round selection, Jarrett Kingston, an offensive lineman, he gets plucked because you have to waive him. You can't keep him on the roster. There were multiple players that the Niners had claimed by other teams that they could not protect because Brandon Aiyuk was occupying that roster spot. And so I think one of the reasons why they were angry at him was, yes, he wasn't practicing and they would like to have him in shape and be in camp and all the rest, but it's because he literally cost them a player. And that is the kind of residue that I don't think comes back to the forefront unless, to your point, he doesn't play well. But that's something that could linger. Like, that's something that I do think might stick with the coaching staff or with the front office. Not that Brandon Aiyuk's a malcontent and not that he's a bad person, but the way that he forced the Niners' hand, whether he won or lost this deal, I don't care what side of the fence you fall on, the fact of the matter is I do believe the Niners also feel like he cost them a potential player. And that is important.
So did he cost them a player, or did the 49ers do that to themselves?
You can make that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the 49ers having to wait this long and using, now that suddenly we got a deadline, is before heads begin to roll, things get done. The season was looming. It's now days away. and you sign a contract. Like, that has been sort of their mode operandi over the last couple of years now. And I think that just simply has to change. I think the 49ers, in a lot of ways, made this bed. I mean, again, when I use Detroit and Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jefferson or Philadelphia, who annually locks up Hurts, A.J. Brown, they do that back in March.
Yeah.
And the 49ers wait until now, where you have this deadline suddenly now, is very, very much evident to everybody that finally things get done. And so while you can put this on Brandon Aiyuk, I think at the end of the day, it might be the San Francisco 49ers that sort of create this whole mess.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that's why Shanahan and Lynch were pissed.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, you could certainly criticize the way they do business. And it's funny to me, though, because I generally think about franchises in football. Like, the Eagles got stuff done early. They probably, I don't know if they saved themselves money, but they got deals done with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
And they kept 2 wide receivers in that building for their price. I don't think the Niners are any less of a franchise than the Philadelphia Eagles, though. But that's the way that they differ is how they do business. Because on paper, if I tell you that the Niners, each now of the last 5 off seasons essentially have paid and kept their homegrown top-tier talent. Maybe not last 5 off seasons, but 5 players. You got Kittle, Warner, Debo, Bosa, and now Aiyuk. All those guys are under lock and key. I'm assuming next summer Brock Purdy will follow. So it isn't as if they don't have a track record of keeping their guys. It's just a matter of when they get the deals done. So to me, it all depends on what you do on the field.
Yeah.
And the difference between this season and the last few off seasons, last year is probably the closest. But when you are top dog, when you are expected to win the NFC and anything less than a Super Bowl appearance, I wouldn't go as far as to say a Super Bowl title, but a Super Bowl, anything less than a Super Bowl appearance is going to be an unsuccessful season for this group. I mean, that's just the way that they have set things up. It's also, you know, a burden. I think that they believe that's a good thing because they have so much talent, Dan.
Yeah, I'm with you. But again, getting back to the comparison with Philadelphia, if they again get off to the slow start and if it's attributed to this bit of a lingering or a hangover from this off season, then therein lies the difference between the two organizations. Now, I don't know what Philadelphia imploded a year ago despite starting 5-0, but
started 10-1.
Philadelphia doesn't necessarily have to worry about any of that because I think A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Hurts and all these guys have been in camp, and it's not something that you can point a finger at as being a potential reason and a cause and effect to the slow start. And there may not be any there to that argument, but you do create an opportunity, as people want to do, to point a finger and saying, this is the reason why the 49ers got off to a slow start. You shot yourself in the foot for that number 1 seed in the first month of the campaign, and it's all because of fill it in. Is it Trent Williams? Is it Brandon Aiyuk? So you just sort of leave yourself a little susceptible when you wait this long to get things done.
You put more pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, the expectations are a Super Bowl appearance. Heavy as the crown. But it doesn't mean that people don't want to wear it. People are gunning for that crown. People have been gunning in the NFC for the Niners crown for what feels like 5 or 6 years, really, since they made that first Super Bowl run with Shanahan's team in 2019. They have been the crown jewel of the NFC. I realize that they haven't won a Super Bowl, but each and every year, it feels like, whether it's national media members, you hear players talk about the respect they have for the Niners, at least if they're not trash talking. Everyone understands that they're top dog, and so do they. And so that's why this year is even more important than last year, because I don't believe that the talent that surrounds Brock Purdy, or the talent really that surrounds Kyle Shanahan, is going to be around next season. And so that's why I'm excited for the year, because if there's one thing that could erase all of the distractions and lingering contract hold-ins and holdouts, it's winning football games. Because I do believe that the Niners players, and this was something that I was, a little iffy on. Like, I don't know how you felt about this, Dan, but do you think that this offseason that that a lot of 49ers are more concerned about getting paid than getting themselves set up for a Super Bowl run?
It could be the case. I think
they want both.
Yeah,
but.
I mean, no fault of the players, right? There's a reason why it's the not for long league. It's always about getting taken care of. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, just to sort of answer your question, I think Kyle Shanahan and all the 49er players, maybe you have a meeting and just saying, I don't want to think about Brock Purdy's contract. I don't want to talk about windows being open. I don't want to talk about the future. We have a team that's good enough to beat the Jets. Let's just eat what's on our plate. Let's just be in sort of this insular mode, where we're just in a vacuum. It's about winning a title. There's so much conjecture and talk about next year and windows being open. Just play some damn football and beat who's ever on the schedule that Sunday. Just play for today. We're so uber focused on next year and re-signing guys and windows being ajar. How good is Brock Purdy? Who the hell cares? Just go out. You got everybody intact. Win your Super Bowl and forget it. All that other stuff will take care of itself. And you'll have enough time next offseason to go through the song and dance. But in terms of right now, the focus should be exclusively on beating the Jets.
See, I think one of the reasons, and we can get into this on the other side, the reason why they're in this position is, yes, it's the way they do business. It's who the Niners are. But it's also because they haven't broken through. I know we can't play that what-if game, but I'd be very curious to see how they'd approach this offseason if they had beaten the Chiefs, because I'm not so sure. Where are people at now? 888-957-9570 is the number. Brandon Aiyuk is under lock and key. Trent Williams still is holding out for the San Francisco 49ers. 9 days away from kickoff. Monday night, 5:15 against the New York Jets at Levi's Stadium. All eyes are going to be on the Niners that night, and they hope that they'll have all their players available, ready to go. They do have one big one. Their wide receiver one, he will be there in all probability on the field come week 1 against the Jets. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone. We roll on to the other side here on 95.7 The Game.
The hold-in is over.
Purdy looking in zone. Lets it rip, and he's got a touchdown to Brandon Aiyuk.
Hey, Gil, when you say those radio announcers, you're excluding one Dan Devone Kahuna, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
We're talking about commitment, Dan. You got to commit, okay? If you're going to throw a pitch inside to Barry Bonds, you got to commit. If you're going to go for a Super Bowl, you have to commit. You have to commit to your players. You have to commit to your fans. You have to commit to your vision. Okay? I'm sitting outside. We're talking with Ken. We're watching this documentary, and I'm telling you, there are 3 absolute truths in life. Death, taxes, and do not throw an inside pitch to Barry Bonds. You cannot do it unless you want to get taken out back to the woodshed.
Bing bong.
You forget just how good Barry Bonds was. Man.
Who forgets?
I do.
Sorry, that came off wrong.
Well, because you think about how good of a... I mean, you just think of him as being a power guy, but he was just so... I'm surprised he didn't do better as a hitting coach. Actually, it makes sense that he didn't do well as a hitting coach because he expected everybody. He was like, well, why can't you just hit that pitch to the opposite field? Expecting everybody to have his skill set. I heard was sort of the doc on him in Florida.
Well, the same reason why Bonds to me is not a very good hitting coach is the same reason why Mike Maddox, Greg's brother, is a better pitching coach than he is. It wasn't the same pitcher he was. But there's something about, again, what do we do? We're communicating.
Yeah.
It's about teaching. It's about extracting the best out of the person that you're speaking to about, well, you know this. You're a public speaker. You talk, people pay you to, enlighten them, essentially, Dan, whether you're, at Terminal 1 in a yoga studio somewhere, or whether you're in the Bahamas, or whether you're
Harvey
out
Milk
back.
Studio. You got to get to that terminal. And next time you're flying out of SFO, man.
Like, what was this, 2 weeks ago, we get done with the show, and, Dan's an international man, or, he's flying somewhere that is extravagant.
Let's go to New York. Going to the hood.
What, the hood up by Central Park? the hood on the Upper West Side? No, I'm just kidding. But he sends me a picture because your flight got delayed.
Yeah.
There's a yoga studio in Terminal 1.
How amazing is that? I'm telling everybody, if you get the opportunity, if you're going anywhere, if you're going to LA, going to Santa Barbara, just a quick little junket, if you get an opportunity to fly out of Terminal 1, they just did it. It's the Harvey Milk Terminal. It's like, seriously, it's like being in a 5-star hotel in Las Vegas. It's got all the shops and restaurants. And so I was early and I was walking around and there was welcome to the Terminal 1 yoga studio. I went inside. It was huge. There was no one there. They had all these mats. They had this nice music playing. I'm like, this works. This works.
That's your kind of spot.
I got zen, and I got centered. And also worked out the kinks in my back from sitting here for 3 hours talking to you, and got on my flight and felt like a new person. But just wait, can I get back to Barry Bonds for a second before I lose my train of thought?
This is your show.
This is why he was so good. Is that so? Aaron Judge, you'll hear most pitchers saying, I made a mistake. Came in with that fastball, or he knew he was guessing change. I got to be smarter than that. Barry Bonds is probably one of the few hitters where you could make your pitch, and he still made you pay. It wasn't a mistake. Like, listen to Greg Maddox or any other pitcher would say, I made a good pitch, and he made you pay more often than not.
Well, that's because it might be your pitch, but Barry Bonds is one of the few players in the history of the game that if it's his pitch, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever pitch he's looking for is his pitch, and he's going to hit it. And he's probably going to hit it really hard. Like, we were discussing this yesterday. 2004, Barry Bonds had, I believe, 375 at-bats because 352 of them, the plate appearances, were either walks or intentional walks. He still hit 45 home runs that year in 360-odd at ABs. That means that every single time he's at the plate, he's also not getting pitches that often that are very good.
Yeah.
But every time that there's a pitch that is his, he's going to drive it with authority. That's why, I saw a lot of conversation this past week about where someone like Shohei Ohtani ranks, and Aaron Judge is having an unbelievable season. His OPS is 1,200. He's on pace for 60-odd homers. I think he would be, the 4th or 5th man in recent memory to have multiple 60-homer seasons. The last guy to do it was Sosa, But that would be Bonds' 4th best offensive season right now. what Aaron Judge is doing. I mean, that's just how unbelievable he was at the plate. Like Barry Bonds, Shohei Ohtani might be a pitcher, and I've thought about this a lot, but Barry Bonds his offensive capability puts him in such a different stratosphere that he doesn't even need to play the field to still be the greatest hitter I've ever seen.
Well, you're right. Think about that.
Maybe even greatest player.
2004. So if Barry Bonds is coming to the plate, I don't care if there's runners on or if he's leading off an inning. You're either walking him or you're pitching around him. And maybe he gets one pitch per at bat. That's a quality pitch. And he never missed it.
Yeah.
Like he would square it up, which is really, when you think about it, it's just so incredible back in the day, the sort of hitter he was. Speaking of baseball, two things I want to get into. Who's your MVP, Shohei or Judge? And secondly, we've talked baseball from time to time here. Are you going to piss me off by just saying Shohei for the sake of Shohei?
No, I'm going to let you know that there's two MVPs.
Yeah, I said Shohei or Aaron Judge. Don't give me a third. I'm not. Come on.
No. I'm saying they play in different leagues. So there's an AL and an NL MVP. They're both going to be MVPs.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Sorry, Ken was looking at me like, should I tell him?
Well, who's better this year? How's that?
Who's better? It's a good question.
Wait, before we do that, because I know I'll forget to do this, we talk baseball from time to time. Are we ever going to throw love to the Kansas City Royals?
1.3%. The math is still there for the Giants. The playoff odds. What about the Kansas City Royals? So
they lost 106 games last year. They're like two games from the number one seed in the American League.
It is the greatest turnaround in sports that no one's going to be talking about here because it's in Kansas City. Really across all of baseball. I think it's because, number one, the market. Number two, all right, and I hate to put you on the spot. Name me 5 Kansas City Royals.
Bobby Witt Jr., and Bobby Witt Jr.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I can name their closer currently, Lucas Erceg, because he was a member of the Oakland Athletics. Seth Lugo's been their ace this year. Cole Reagans has been an up-and-coming lefty who throws cheddar bobs. Bobby Witt, obviously. Salvador Perez.
Salvador Perez is still there.
Yeah, he's still on the team. Still hitting tanks. That guy was... God, actually, yeah, literally 10 years ago was when he was in the World Series taking an L to the San Francisco Giants. He was just a young pup back then, Dano. And
he wasn't even young back then. I want to say he had been in the league for a minute.
Yes, he has. I think he's in his, is he 36 or 37 now? I'm not too sure. This is from the 707 Xfinity mobile text line. Not a bad idea. They should have made a Bonds rule. You can't walk/intentionally walk the same player consecutively or they take an extra base instead of a single. Yeah, that would have... Can you imagine? Even without a Bonds rule, he still was the greatest I've ever seen. And that's why, so if you're talking about Shohei, Judge, to me, this season, Judge would get the nod because he plays center field at an average level, and he's still a respectable defender. But as far as, a player that just can take over a game, I mean, Shohei has every single right to be in that category because he's also probably going to be the first guy to steal 50 bases and hit 50 home runs in the one season, of course, that he took off pitching. I mean, he's going to be back on the bump next year, and that's why he's a player that is unlike anybody. And in fact, it's funny. I was thinking about him last segment when we were talking about Brock Purdy because, and people have said this a lot. I don't know why it gets overlooked. Brock Purdy is not the best deal in sports. He's the second best contract in sports. The best contract in sports is Shohei Ohtani. And it's because of the number that I'm holding up. These amount of M's that he's making this year. $2 million. He's going to make $2 million next year. He's going to make $2 million the year after that. And then in 2037 is when his deferred money kicks in.
That's pretty amazing.
Shohei Ohtani makes $2 million. And he's going to be an MVP in a year he didn't even pitch.
$2 million contractually from the Dodgers, but another, 150 in terms of endorsements.
Wow, dude.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying against their books, we talk all the time in football about how you can you can manipulate the cap, and Brandon Aiyuk is going to count 3.5 this year and then 7 next year, even though he's making $120 million. Well, the Dodgers just reconfigure their cap with a guy who's willing to take deferred money.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. He backloaded the end of that deal. That's really incredible. But Aaron Judge, I think we got to salute this dude. And I know it's sort of like, he's so good. But when you think about...
Well, he's been carrying Volpe all year.
Well, come on now. But when you think about where we're at, what's the collective batting average? We can look this up. But I want to say the batting average right now, the medium, the average batting average has got to be, low 240s? I mean, this is such a down year offensively. I mean, they haven't seen an average like this since they lowered the mound back in the 1960s. I mean, the offensive output is just non-existent. It has become a pitcher's league once again, and it's strategic baseball. We're now stolen bases are back into the game. Thank God. And this dude is walking down 62 in a season like this. This isn't the steroid era, man. This season is an outlier. And this guy is eyeing 62, which I still consider the record. I don't go 70s with Sosa, McGuire, and those boys. I mean, I just think that you have to recognize where we're at in terms of offense or the lack thereof, where it's anemic across the board, and this guy doing what it is that he's doing this year.
Aaron Judge, you're saying?
Aaron Judge.
Okay, so I do think that there is some impact from having a player like Soto in the lineup. And honestly, Aaron Judge is having a better season, but Juan Soto, he to me is the toughest out in that order. And
who will be a Giant next year?
A Tokyo Giant?
I don't want to hear any of that. Like, Soto is not coming to the San Francisco Giants.
Dude, he's not coming back to the West Coast.
He may.
Well,
but he's not coming to the Giants. Like, let's just stop that right now.
Where would he go on the West Coast, you think?
Padres? Oh, he already been there.
Well, I actually saw, I think it was Bleacher Report put out a possible destination spot for Blake Snell, like odds right now. Number 1 is San Diego. I think the Giants are 5th. Like the Texas Rangers were higher than them. I think, the Mets are on every single list because they're just going to pay everybody. Ken, by the way, how much money does Steve Cohen have?
Huh?
Isn't he the owner?
Sorry, I was channeling my inner Evan Giddings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's got like $16 billion.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely insane.
So he's going to break off something for Soto if he can.
I mean, they're going to let Pete Alonso go probably this year, regardless of what, how many homers he hits. It doesn't matter. But yeah, you're probably going to, let him walk and then bring in Soto. Or, honestly, I heard something on the Fan a couple of days ago. Someone suggested, if you let Soto walk, go after the pitching that's going to be around next year. Corbin Burns, talking about Snell, but Corbin Burns is going to be a highly touted free agent. And based on what he's done in Baltimore this year, I would go get him.
The one thing he can't do is hold a guy on. I swear to God, you, Dan Devone, could steal second base off of Corbin Burns. This is the slowest man to home plate I've ever seen in my life.
He's the perfect Met then, because that's what we do. We don't hold anybody
worse than John Lester?
He's up there. John Lester with me behind home plate. I mean, that's basically what we're looking at. No, but I think, and it's funny, actually, because you mentioned a guy, that'd be the dude that I would go after if I'm the San Francisco Giants. It's Pete Alonso.
Oh, that'd be a nice fit.
That would be the guy. If you can get him,
he could hit in this park too. Like every time he's come here, he's definitely hit a few out.
Well, so did Soler, but
Pete Alonso on a shortstop, and then you slide Fitzgerald over to second.
I like Fitz at short, but they got to get another bat. That's for sure. 888-957, huh?
The Met talk just for a second when you're talking about Steve Cohen's money. Are you a Bill Maher fan at all? Whatever.
Not anymore.
His podcast.
Yeah.
You can tell me. We'll get back to Bill Maher.
We'll talk during the break.
But his podcast, I'm telling you, man, like that. I think it's called Club Random, where he just sits there and drinks and gets stoned with his guest. There's like the best 90 minutes of entertainment was him interviewing Quentin Tarantino. They are so stoned, like an hour into this thing, but it's such poignant conversation. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Anyways, he was
I respect it.
A minority owner of the New York Mets.
Tarantino?
No. Bill Maher, with the Wilpons. And he was saying that during the pandemic, they do, I forget the name for it, but they would go around and like, okay, you're an owner, and typically we're cutting you big checks, but not during this unprecedented time where there's this disease that's preventing anybody from coming to the stadium. You've got to spend more money. He's like, this is the biggest ripoff. Like I've never lost this much money. It was the worst decision of my life. And then along came Steve Cohen, who's like, Steve Cohen, who he prays to every day, just saved the day for all of those guys and just wrote the biggest check, and they all walked away, the Wilpons and the Bill Mahers of the world. But I digress.
Well, that is what I think a lot of people are hoping the Giants do at some point, is just write the biggest check. Yeah. Hopefully somebody will take it. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, Saturdays on the Game here, 9 to noon as always. And you know what? Let's go to the phone lines, Dan, because we got one of our favorites on the line. One Filmo Mike wants to talk about Major League Baseball. What's up, Mike?
Yo, what's popping?
Not a mucho.
Y'all sound lit this morning.
What do you mean, Mike?
Brandon Aiyuk signing. Y'all sound happy. You sound a little bit. Sometimes you wake up, Evan, and you sound a little bit groggy, but you sound chipper. Dan Devone always sound like he always sound hella weird. But anyway, I had a question for y'all real quick. I had a question. Usually I don't ask a question. Usually I delegate what type of weed y'all smoke. But do y'all partake?
From time to time.
Okay, Evan, you take me as a old school. You probably used to smoke cherry pie back in the day, if you remember that strain. now Dan does yoga. He definitely smokes the old school Acapulco Gold. He smoked like $5 weed. Like, he don't smoke good weed. He smoked the what do you call it? The shake. Dan definally smokes shake.
It's got stems in it, Mike.
Well, now he take out the stems. He ain't crazy. You feel me? He's very smart. But, he don't want the full effect, so he just do the shake. Anyway, though, it's good shake, though. Hey, baseball is very...
Bro, just can we clarify things, Filmo? You got me wrong. I'm Papaya Kush. Kush? Is it Papaya Kush? Papaya Kush the whole way, brother.
Oh, okay, my bad, Papaya Kush. That's okay. You like the Hawaiian, okay. Let me know. They got the little accent. Hawaiians got the accent. Anyway, though, my bad. I hate to ramble. But baseball's a lot more interesting this year for whatever reason. But I said this a while ago. The stars of the 90s, you had people like Albert Bell, like the minimals. You had Gary Sheffield, that Greg Maddux. Doc, I haven't seen it, but I'm gonna start watching it. I've seen a couple clips. It's going crazy. Barry Bonds is one of my favorite athletes of all time. I don't know why we don't praise him more. The greatness of Bonds is crazy. He just got accepted to the Pittsburgh Pirates Hall of Fame, and I looked at his numbers there, and it was like his numbers there was crazy. And then to do what he did for his hometown team is unbelievable, man. Like, Bonds is he's like we had Curry, you know what I'm saying? We had Bonds may be one of the, as far as skilled perfectionists, he's up there with Jordan to me, man. In my opinion, I mean, I'm just speaking from a fan perspective and a local home guy. Like, Griffey was raw. He kept getting injured, but Bonds, it was something different about him, man. And then to compare him with Shohei, when Bonds from 1999 to about 2006, if Bonds was at bat, you stop what you were doing and you're watching Bonds' at bat.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you, Mike. Like, he's an athlete that makes you reevaluate the sport. He makes you reevaluate how you watch the game. I think Curry does that. I think LeBron has done that for me. I think in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes is someone that does that. Honestly, a guy on Monday night the Niners will see in 9 days at his peak, Aaron Rodgers, did that for me when I watched him throw a football. He made me rethink what was possible in the sport just because of the natural gifts that he had. But Philmo Mike he's right. It's not just even I should say during that stretch from 99 to 2006, because the Xfinity Mobile text line brings up an interesting point. Like the Bonds we're talking about is steroid Barry, right? We're talking about a guy that was a freaking cheat code, but he was still a first ballot Hall of Famer prior to that. He basically traded in his Gold Glove for more home runs.
Killer bees, him and Bobby Bonilla back in the day. Remember that?
He won 7 Gold Gloves in 8 years.
That's the one shame, is when you saw him in Pittsburgh, or even in his early days with the Dodgers, or excuse me, with the Giants against the Dodgers. I remember vividly one play that he made out there in left field, but he was so, just physically, he was so much more fluid. And as a left fielder, how he would just go gap to gap, and his arm was never strong, but he had, accuracy was. And then much like, do you remember, go look at video of Sammy Sosa when he came up with the Rangers. He was a beanpole, and he too had a cannon for an arm and was just so much fun to watch out in the outfield. And then both of those guys, once they started sticking that 6-inch needle in the arse, they suddenly couldn't move. And, they became cyborgs. They forfeited all of that defense and that grace and fluidity and watching those guys run. Barry Bonds and anybody out there from Sarah High School, hit us up at 888-957-9570. The stories I heard about this guy as a wide receiver, like Jerry Rice-esque, and had opportunities to play at that position at the collegiate level. Just this thin guy who could go out and get it on a jump ball and outrun defenders. And then suddenly he became this beast out in left field that, couldn't bend over, essentially.
Well, he didn't have to. All he had to do is reach the other part of the plate. That's about as... No, like Barry Bonds is... He's ridiculous. And just like watching Shohei hit is ridiculous. Watching Aaron Judge hit a baseball is ridiculous. And really what we're talking about, and I do want to transition back to the Bay Area a little bit, because we have seen players, not just Bonds, but also there's one who plays for the Warriors right now. These are blank check players. These are players that when it's time to pay them, you give them the max and you give them whatever they want. And I think we overlook how many of those players there actually are, because this entire offseason for the San Francisco 49ers has been about, well, just pay this guy. Right now it's Trent Williams. Well, just give him what he wants. Give him a blank check. How many players actually deserve a blank check? That's what I'm going to move into on the other side. 888-957-9570 is the number. I do think there are blank check players out there, and there are some that play in the Bay Area. And there was one that got a blank check not too long ago. But how many actually deserve it, and what is a blank check player to you? Evan Giddings and Dan Devone here on 95.7 The Game. We'll take a quick break, be back on the other side right here.
The economy is rough, and traditional four-year programs are just not cutting it. People need something new, and Merit America is that. 22 weeks of flexible training led by experts.
Dan Devone is not just a person. He's an entity. He is, in some cases, omnipotent.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
Oh, I'm glad to be rocking with you. Big Kahuna, Dan Devone, 9 to noon. My name's Evan Giddings. Look, we always kind of stumble into, I don't know, these different sports conversations that captivate me, Dan. Last segment, Philmo Mike called in and, he did label us as, users of the devil's lettuce, so to speak, and was kind of telling us about ourselves through particular strains. But he also brought up a subject that I find fascinating, which is about these players that ask us to reevaluate what we're watching in sports. And I would define them as blank check players. And that's where I want to kick off this conversation as we enter hour number 2 here on Saturdays on The Game. And I'm not sure how many there are in the Bay Area. And I've kind of threw it out. Our YouTube chat, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, was throwing in some really nice suggestions. I honestly, I think the only blank check player in the Bay Area right now is Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, Estimated Eyes, one of our loyal listeners and P1 YouTubers, threw out a lot of names around sports, right? We threw out Shohei, Judge, Jokic might be one, Giannis, Mahomes. These are the suggestions. But an interesting name came up. Because if I asked you on the San Francisco 49ers, who is the blank check player for them? If there is one, who would it be? For the San Francisco 49ers. They just paid Brandon Aiyuk 4 years, $120 million. They gave out a ton of money to Christian McCaffrey in guarantees this offseason. They paid Bosa what he wanted last year, Debo the year before. They've committed $350 million in cash towards this season.
If I had to pick one.
If you had to pick one, who would it be?
George Kittle.
Wow. George Kittle.
Yeah.
How come?
Well, first of all, it's his value as a tight end. I think he's surpassed Kelsey for being the best in the NFL right now. I think that, and Kelsey is very good in the postseason, but during the regular season, I think that when healthy, George Kittle is physically where this all begins, right? In terms of being a catching tight end, not only a guy who receives the ball, but being able to get in those seams downfield, running after the catch, blocking, all those things that we know George Kittle to be one of the greatest to ever do it. But if I had to pick the reason why he's the blank check guy, it's because he is the leader of that team, in my estimation, that I think that he is the personality on that team, that you remove George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers and they cease to be, in terms of what our perception of them currently as being the Super Bowl contender. So George Kittle is the guy.
No, I think that sort of, I don't know, like innate quality of leadership, being the face of a franchise, being a representative, in addition to just a high-class athlete, that is to me what being a blank check player is. I personally don't think that Kittle's that guy. I don't think the Niners have one, to be honest.
Well, I thought the game was we had to pick one.
Well, if I have to pick one, yeah, you got me there. If I have to pick one, it's the guy that is holding out right now. It's Trent Williams. If I have to pay a single player on the 49ers whatever they want, it's Trent Williams. It's not the quarterback. It's not Nick Bosa. It's not Christian McCaffrey. It's not Fred Warner. It's Trent Williams.
But blank check. So if we're to go by pure definition, I think there's a number, there's a ceiling on how much. I give him as much money as he wants. But in terms of blank check, again, that value, I'd argue George Kittle for the reasons I just stated, for what it is that he means in terms of the overall persona of that team. Like, I don't know, say, look at Jalen Moore is not as good as Trent Williams. I think you're looking at this exclusively from wins and losses and an impact between the lines. But blank check to me, well, I would write him the biggest check, but blank check sort of goes into a whole nother sort of stratosphere.
You would write the biggest check for the team to George Kittle.
No, I would write the biggest check. Maybe I'm contradicting myself. If Trent Williams wants to be the highest paid at his position, I'd write him the biggest check in the history of left tackles.
I think
blank check, meaning in terms of value, I think George Kittle has more value to that football team at the end of the day than Trent Williams.
I think with what Trent just stabilizes on that team, it's him for me. And statistically, they are just so much better when he's on the field. And that's why I'd find it interesting that he's the one guy that's still not under lock and key. And I think it's because he has asked not for a blank check, but for a boatload of money. And the reports are out there that the Niners and he are not close. I still think there's plenty of time for them to figure this out. I'm not too concerned about it, to be honest. I still think he'll be there week 1 against the Jets. But I think it is because he is a blank check player. You know, he has a number in mind. The Niners maybe don't want to come near it. I'm not too sure. If Trent Williams asked for $30 million, would you pay him? Because I would.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I can't do, I said at the top of the show.
It's not our money, but.
Exactly. I cannot. I have no room. I have no bandwidth to get into contract talk after what it is that we just did with Brandon Aiyuk. Like, I can't even begin to think about how much money, and the two sides are not even close. Like, I'm so done with it. Just sign the dude. And when you do, we can talk about it. You can talk to the listeners about numbers and how far apart the two sides are. I'm exhausted.
Well, no, but like, this is the exercise. Just if you were to present a player with a blank check, who would that be? For Dan Devone, it's George Kittle. For me, it's Trent Williams. Right now, I would not present. I know that they restructured his contract and gave him more money and made him the highest paid player in addition to what he was already making at his position. If Christian McCaffrey asked for a blank check, I would not give it to him.
Yeah.
Because of the position that he plays.
Exactly.
If Brandon Aiyuk asked for a blank check, I would not give it to him. If Brock Purdy right now asked for a blank check, I would not give it to him. The only player on the Niners that I would give a blank check to and say, write what you want, and I will hand you that dough, is Trent Williams. Because I think he's that important to where this season is supposed to go.
When we talk about checks, blank or otherwise, you know what I find sort of ironic in all of this? Now, I know there's a salary cap involved, so it's not necessarily apples and apples, but how we peruse through these contracts, and Brandon Aiyuk, perfect example, and we know every dollar amount and where it's allocated and the salary cap hit and how much is deferred and how much is guaranteed and the APY, and all of his money is out there for public consumption. And there are a lot of people that feel as though, you know, we had this conversation in the first hour. Who won? Who lost? And there's some that actually take it a step further and feel that, the 49ers are getting, you know, this guy's greedy or this player's greedy, and the 49ers are having to pay this guy how much money? And there's almost some empathy on the part of the 49ers. Let me just remind everybody that while we can all see and we can all go through every dollar amount that is in the contract, the guaranteed numbers for that of Brandon Aiyuk, nobody opens up the books to the San Francisco 49ers. Like, nobody goes through, and let me just remind everybody that Jerry Jones' franchise is worth $11 billion annually. The 49ers are $1 billion team annually in terms of their overall revenue. If you went through their books, and I'm saying God bless, everybody get theirs, right? But when you think about the television contracts as well as the streaming contracts, and then you think about all the gambling revenue, football is a good place to be if you're an owner, because you are just making money hand over fist. But nobody has the opportunity through a paper or a website where we can just say, oh, look how much money they're making. Because if we did, it would put the $30 million per year for one Brandon Aiyuk in a very different perspective. Now, I get it. The reason why we focus so much on Brandon Aiyuk is because of the salary cap, and that you have to work within certain parameters so that you can afford everybody. But this idea that the 49ers got taken to the cleaners, or any sentimentality or empathy on the part of the 49ers having to spend this much money, I think it's important for all of us to keep in mind just how much revenue NFL football teams, including the San Francisco 49ers, make at the end of a year.
But also how much they're willing to spend. Again, they will be the top spenders in the NFL this upcoming season. they were at or near the top last season.
Point being is they can afford it. And I get it. Not everybody spends as much as they do, but they can afford it.
Yeah, but Jerry Jones is somebody that chooses to not spend his money. And that's where I think that the ownership group does deserve credit. They are willing to put their money where their mouths are to compete for a Super Bowl. And that's why it has been frustrating the past couple of seasons to watch this team fall short of the eventual goal, which is to win it all, because they have so much freaking talent. So much talent. And I know that there are other teams around the NFL that, and even in the NFC, that you and I both like, and I think that have gotten better and that have comparable rosters. But the Niners are the most, to me, they're the most cohesive of the talented groups. They have been together for the longest amount of time. They have the chemistry. They have the experience of being in the trenches, of being in big games, of understanding what it takes to get to the Super Bowl. Maybe not win a Super Bowl, but get to a Super Bowl. And that would be the one advantage that they have over a team like Philly or a team like Detroit or a team like Green Bay, who I think a lot of people are high on this season.
Are they cohesive defensively? Like offensively, all those guys have been together for a while.
That's a good point.
Defensively, I think they were third in the NFL, I want to say, in terms of points allowed last year. Both offense and defense, they were like number 3, respectively, which is the balance you want to have. But I know what my eyes saw a year ago. They couldn't get off the field on third down. There seemed to be, especially the taste in our mouths at the end of last season against Green Bay and Detroit. Like, I know what it is that I saw. And yes, they're littered with the Fred Warners and the Boses and the Hargraves, and they got boys. But again, my eyes don't lie. And that was a team that got shredded in the postseason. And there just seems to be some holes. And I don't know if that cohesion applies to that side of the ball.
Well, I think a lot of people threw that at the foot of Steve Wilks or the feet of Steve Wilks. Just basically, I don't know if he was... It felt to me like he was kind of scapegoated. Felt to me like a lot of players didn't feel like they were being used properly instead of taking it upon themselves to just simply play better. I defer more to Fred Warner's stance in which he was basically saying, like, we just got to, the players playing coach is coach. We got to be better. But I do think there's a reason why Shanahan decided to split up defensive duties this year. Sorensen's the coordinator, but Staley's also going to be the eyes in the sky. He's going to help schematically during the week, and then he's going to be an extra set of hands and eyes during games. I don't think Shanahan trusted his defense last year, and maybe that's what he's trying to address, Devone, is he's trying to address those cohesive issues that I didn't think showed up in the Super Bowl, but to your point, they were certainly clear in the Detroit game, especially in the first half when they gave up like $170 on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't stop anybody. So I think defensively, I'm curious to see how the Niners react this season because I think they have a ton of talent. I think they avoided disaster with Leonard Floyd and Gross Matos, for example, getting hurt in the final preseason game. Floyd looks like he's going to be someone that's available come week 1. He's had a great track record of maintaining his health and being on the field and producing, even though he's north of 30. And then, honestly, I think that the defensive line to me is going to be dictated by how great of a season Nick Bosa has. And I do expect him to have a great season because he's had a full off season and he's been engaged and he's been there for voluntary workouts. He's been there for summer workouts. He's been there for all of training camp. He didn't go through what he did last off season. And when he's had full time to prepare in whatever fashion, whether he's there or not, he has been one of the top 2, if not the best edge rushers in football.
Yeah, and he's always sort of relying on at least somebody else putting some pressure on the other edge.
But he's never had any help, though. I mean, I want to say last year, the most sacks outside of Nick Bosa from that spot was like Cleveland Farrell. And he had somewhere south of 5. Like, I think Amenahue and Ebukam 2 years prior were the second sack-leading players on the Niners with like 5 sacks. I mean, it's Nick Bosa and then it's everybody else.
It'd be nice if you can get some sort of pressure from whether it's Hargrave or it's Because I think Floyd is sort of this one-dimensional hired hand that he's not good against the run, that he's there for one reason, and that is to put pressure on the quarterback. So he's going to be in obvious throwing downs. In fact, I think he got hurt in trying to support the run. That's not what he does. That's what, big Jordan Elliott and some of these other, the Collins, Malik Collins, who they brought over from Houston, that's what those guys do. But it's nice if you can get somebody else to at least alleviate a double team and a running back that are all there to sort of chip and help against one Nick Bosa. But yeah, he's so good that if he's physically peaked and ready to go, he can defeat all of that.
But I also don't think we're going to learn how good this defense is until probably midway through the season. Number one, because it takes some time, but also because they're not going to be whole. Dre Greenlaw's not going to be on the field. Talanoa Hufanga is probably not going to be on the field. He's working his way back from a season-ending injury a year ago. So is Greenlaw, tearing his Achilles in the Super Bowl. This team is not going to be whole until midway through the year. And so I'm interested to see how they perform. I'm interested to see which group stands out, because it seems like it's always been on the defensive line. And I think this year the secondary could take a step forward for the Niners. This is a team that can be better in pass coverage than they've been in years past. So I think that for me, like what I'm looking for is how quickly they come out of the gates, because go back 365 days, there were questions about what the Niners, like how fast that they would start. And they calmed all concerns by just boat racing Pittsburgh week 1 on the road and then jumping out to a 5-0 start. I don't know if they need to start 5-0, but I do believe that we're going to learn a lot about this team and where they are at, where they've been at this entire offseason based on how they play against the Jets.
I think there's a good chance that the Jets beat them soundly. I hate being that guy. And not that they're going to be a bad team this year, but I just think early on, the mojo with that Jet team for one game. And again,
RELAX.
And then when we think about the 49ers, who are still not out of the woods in terms of internal drama, because Trent Williams is still out there after what it is that we saw with Brandon Aiyuk. I am a proponent.
Would you still consider that drama?
Well, he's not in camp. I mean, he's not there. And so there is still, at least, albeit the door isn't ajar it's not very wide, but it's still ajar that you may have Jalen Moore protecting the blind side of one Brock Purdy against Quinnen Williams and the boys from that of the New York Jets. The Jets have been pointing at this damn thing since they went to a Super Bowl in the late 1960s. I'm just saying, for one game to begin a season, that Aaron Rodgers' return and all of the excitement, which you just don't see in New York for the Jets, is real. And I just think that the 49ers, with all the turbulence of this offseason, could be susceptible in week 1, when you're thinking about just two teams headed in different directions, that the 49ers may not be at peak level emotionally to handle a Jet team that has been pointing at this game and this season forever. Or so it appears.
See, but I also think that buildup is something that has them teetering. Like, the Jets are a team that there's a lot of expectations on them, and I think they're unnecessarily high. People are talking about the New York Jets people are talking about if they can go to the Super Bowl with a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear. That's a really high bar to set.
I don't even want to go that far. I'm just talking about I think at the end of the year, the 49ers' one-loss record will be better than that of the Jets. I'm looking at this exclusively through the vacuum of week 1. I'm just a bit afraid that the 49ers, as much as you say, oh, it's a football game and emotionally they'll be ready to go, this stuff has a weird way of rearing its head, maybe in week 1 and week 2 before you begin to sort of hit your stride. And I'm just saying there's a buzzsaw coming to town in the name of the New York Jets.
But it's not as if they're not dealing with issues. I mean, Hassan Reddick is still not present. He's still racking up fines. And that's a guy that they traded for this offseason.
Well, it's not an issue because, as we discussed, basically it's play or don't play. There is no negotiations, or there's no back and forth, or there's no scratching there's no scratching your cell phone from whatever it is that they do. There is none of this sort of, verbal darts that are being traded by both sides.
But I think if you're going to describe the Williams saga as drama, Hassan Reddick is drama. This guy literally asked for a trade after being traded to a team that he knew he was going to have to play for. And yes, the GM came out and shut it down and all the rest. And I think a lot of people are wondering if the Niners should have done that with Aiyuk or maybe Williams. No, not Trent, but with Aiyuk when he asked for a trade. But if you're going to say that there's still distractions on the Niners, I can use the exact same argument to say that the Jets have their own set of issues.
But I would say that, or I would counter that the anticipation.
Because I don't think either is that big of an issue to their respective teams. I don't think Trent Williams is considered a distraction by the 49ers. And the way that the Jets have handled it, I'm not sure I would consider or believe that they consider Reddick a distraction to them.
I just think the anticipation of this season for the New York Jets outweighed whatever distraction Hassan Reddick was or is for the New York Jets.
But isn't anticipation just another form of expectation? Like, they're expected to be good this year. They're expected to compete. That is something that does not generally follow the New York Jets, who are a team which I believe has the longest playoff drought in the NFL currently. I mean, this is a very hungry fan base, obviously. The Jets have a very hungry fan base. I don't know. I just feel like people have put a lot on the Jets this offseason, and they're kind of putting the cart before the horse.
Well, they're going to be better than they were last year. And last year, they were a 7-win team with probably the worst quarterback in the last decade in Zach Wilson. 7 wins. You can't, and I'm not an Aaron Rodgers guy. I think he's a tremendous football player, but just personally, I'm out on the guy.
Yeah.
But even me will give him his flowers. They can get them at least 2 or 3 more wins, which is good enough. 10 wins is getting you to the postseason.
You would think.
It's that defense, and they got serious stars. From Breece Hall to Cedric Wilson to Mike Williams and a revamped offensive line. And yes, Aaron Rodgers. Look at, if Tom Brady could take you to a Super Bowl at age 40, why can't Aaron Rodgers? And I have no idea where they're going to end up when it's all said and done with, but I think in week 1, it's a bad matchup for the San Francisco 49ers.
By the way, speaking of the Jet stars, did you see what happened to Quinnen Williams? I think, was it last week with Jim Rome?
What did he do?
Dude, so Quinnen Williams went on Jim Rome's show, and he was asked, he's going on to promote his brand or some sort of thing, and Jim Rome, I guess, doesn't ask him a lot about the brand. He's asking him about Rodgers or the Jets or kind of the juicy storylines for the New York football season, and Quinnen Williams basically is like, dude, I'm here to talk about my product. And so Jim Rome basically, he doesn't hang up on him, but he just cuts the interview short and proceeds to rip him for the next 5 to 7 minutes about how you come on my show, I ask you questions. If I want to plug your product, I can do that, but that's not what I'm here to do. It's your job to come on my show and ask questions. It was bizarre. I'm not saying either side was right or wrong. I generally side with the player there, but at the same time, like, I can understand if you're interviewing a player and you want to ask them a question or two outside of just what their product is, and they're not going to talk about it.
Well, that's how Romy made a name for himself. That's who he is.
Just ripping guys?
Well, I mean, go back to how he jumped onto the scene when he called Jim Everett Chrissy Everett.
Yeah.
You won't do it to my face.
That one worked out for him, didn't it?
You won't do it to my face? Yes, I will, Chris. Boom. That's who he is. He's sort of like he lives in that space of controversy, that no one's bigger than me and that I'll stand up to anybody. So
you've interacted with a lot of athletes. You ever felt like one was going to slug you?
Well, you know who used to scare there were 2 guys that actually literally would intimidate me. It was Mike Tyson and Mike Holmgren. Like, I think Holmgren was this big, bold. This is when he was the head coach.
Hold on. When did you talk to Mike Tyson?
I broke my back.
It was more of a pool reporting thing. It wasn't necessarily he and I in a one-on-one, but okay. I do remember Like, that's the one guy I would not want to, like, sit down one-on-one and have to ask him a tough question, because he's a guy who just doesn't give a damn. He'll get up and punch you and worry about the consequences later. Like, he just wasn't wired right back in the day. He's obviously gone very zen since then. And Mike Holmgren obviously wasn't going to punch you or anything, but in terms of intimidating, he was like just this huge mountain of a man. And the way he didn't like me to begin with, and the way he spoke in just these very deliberate terms and would just look right through you were two very challenging interviews. But
well, we do have to hit a break, but on the other side, we are going to go down the list of athletes that have wanted to punch Dan Devone on 95.7 The Game. But no, really what we're getting into is the weight of expectations. The Niners have a weight of expectation that I think is comparable but different to the weight of expectation of their Week 1 opponent, of the New York Jets. How does that impact the way you view this matchup? Who's got more riding on it? Is it because of the contracts that have been signed or haven't been signed? Who would you give a blank check to right now in the San Francisco 49ers? We're taking your calls. We're taking your texts. 888-957-9570. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone. This is Saturdays on The Game. We're back after this.
The hold-in is over.
Purdy looking end zone. Let's it.
Big Dog, do you really think that I would bring you on this show only to talk about your product? Do you think I care that much about that product? Or even at all? Do you really think that was our agreement? Come on and just get a bunch of free advertising that other people pay for. My guy, that's not how that's done. So again, without totally losing it and going off, I want to reiterate, great player, really good dude, very poor execution.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
Well, that was Jim Rome 5 days ago on his show talking about Quinnen Williams, the defensive tackle for the New York Jets, who, again, will be here in 9 days at Levi's Stadium, Monday Night Football, 5:15 kickoff. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone on 95.7 The Game. That was Jim Rome. Basically just saying his piece. Like, love you, big dog. And what happened preceding that is Quinnen Williams came on to the Jim Rome show and was asked about the New York Jets and basically just wanted to talk about his product. And so Jim Rome was like, that's not what we do here. I'm going to ask you questions, and you're getting free advertisement.
Well, one thing you cannot do, Quinnen Williams, if that's the way you feel about it, and you're unhappy that he's not giving more love or showcasing your product, you can't just leave. Because if you leave and it's somebody like that, a Jim Rome or a network broadcaster, you've just given them a blank slate just to rip you with no recourse, right? And they have time that's allotted, right? Because you know how these shows work. Well, we got like from 10 o'clock to 10:20, you're going to talk to Quinnen Williams. And if you just leave, you've now just given them free reign to go after you. And like never just leave an open mic to somebody like that of Jim Rome just to simply lay into you without you providing your side of the story. Like, that's not a wise move, my man. Like, you can stay on the show and say, look it, man, go back at him and say, can we get into my product? And Jim Rome may go after you and say, although I think it's going to be a lot more tempered if you're actually having that conversation with Quinnen Williams as opposed to Quinnen Williams leaving, and now I can say whatever the hell it is that I want.
Well, even if you're in the right, and I don't know how respectful or disrespectful Williams might have perceived Rome to be during the actual interview. Like, I've seen some athletes here in the Bay Area that are not very happy with the questions that they're being asked, either because they've had a bad game or because they feel like they're not about the game, they're unfair, maybe it's a leading question. Reporters oftentimes, I think, are trying to find an angle because either they're writing a story or they're trying to uncover something or, report, basically. But I do think that there is a line that sometimes gets crossed about what's fair and what's not as far as a question. Like, I've personally never been in that situation where I feel like an athlete has been pissed at the questions that I've asked them, but I also have not necessarily needed to ask a poignant, difficult question. Like, there are ones that are hard to ask. If you're trying to get into a player's legacy or how they're perceived or how they perceive themselves, those are things that you kind of towed the line a bit. I don't know, Devone, like you sat down with a lot of high-profile athletes. You've been in pools. You were talking about Tyson. Holmgren, you said, was a bit aggressive. Like,
no, just intimidating.
Intimidating.
Yeah, for me personally. I'll tell you somebody that I had to, Brett Boone back in the day. Remember Brett Boone? Dude,
he's an Odyssey MLB insider now.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he comes on the show every once. He's like the nicest guy in the world.
Well, okay.
What'd you do to piss him off?
I didn't do anything to piss him off, but I think there's a way to go about asking a difficult question. Back to our original premise here is that, you have to sort of befriend a guy, and then you have to, you have to learn how to sort of work it in. But I remember we had him, I used to do a Sunday night show, like a half-hour show, and it'd be sort of a wrap-up of the week in sports, and he came on, and they said, well, he's coming into studio. And I remember my producer, this is at the time when Jose Canseco had mentioned him in his book that Aaron Boone was doing steroids. And Aaron Boone was enjoying Brett Boone was enjoying a huge season. We're talking about Brett Boone, right?
Yeah, Brett Boone with the Mariners.
Was enjoying a huge season. And I said to my producer, we have to ask him about steroids. And my producer's like, look, he's coming in with his wife. He's driving all the way in from Bellevue. I don't want to do that to the guy. Can we just stay? I'm like, there's no way in hell that I can have him in studio and not ask him about steroids. And he handled it well, but the question had to be asked. So sometimes it's just like you got to soften that blow. Like, there's ways of asking the questions You cannot just simply go after a guy and saying, are you doing steroids, and be confrontational. There's a way that you can befriend him, get the conversation to be a little more jovial, and then just say, hey, listen, I got to do this.
Just blindside him.
But yeah, I think there's credibility behind all of that. You can't just, it's easy because we all want to, as fans and as former athletes, we always just sort of want to suck up to these guys. We want to be nice to these guys. It's difficult. And then you don't want to be that guy who's like, well, the prototypical print journalist who just simply is a guy that's got like a ham sandwich in his back pocket and 2 left feet, and the guy that's just sort of angry at the world and is going to take that angst out on athletes that are, 3 feet taller and much better looking and make 15 times more money. There's always that sort of dynamic that works into this when it comes to sort of print guys back in the day. Now that line's been blurred because a lot of print guys do radio and they do YouTube channels and what have you. So, but yeah, I think that difficult questions are all part of this. And, it has to be part of the oath that you take as a journalist, maybe not so much in terms of this, but if you ever get an athlete in the room, the difficult questions have to be asked in order for you to be considered having any level of credibility in the industry, I think.
Well, let's take Brandon Aiyuk, for example, because eventually he's going to have to speak. He will talk to the media. He put I think he had a quill, which is what he used to sign his new contract extension, which I thought was kind of funny. But eventually he's going to have to talk to the media. What do you think the first question is going to be? It's going to follow that sigh, that noise, which we've all made after seeing, this thing's finally over.
What took so long?
I think that's the question. Yeah, what took so long? There's a lot of conflicting reports out there about the timing of this contract, what was offered to you and when. Your agent said that Schefter wasn't necessarily telling the whole truth. Diana Rossini was reporting that the Niners had an offer to trade you that was contingent upon the Broncos, who said no. There was conflicting reports about trades that you were willing to accept with certain organizations, namely Pittsburgh. How would you sum up the last 2 months? I don't know if that's a fair question, but I feel like something like that, however it's worded, it needs to be asked.
Yeah, that's not a tough question. I think it has to be asked, and I think he can dance around that. I think that if you really wanted to go after him, or if this was New York, I guarantee you there'd be somebody from the Post that would say, hey, listen, the 49ers wanted to drive you to the airport because they were down for a trade for Amari Cooper in a 2nd and 5th round. How does it feel going back and playing for them, knowing that they wanted you out of town? Like, that to me would be the tough question.
Yeah, the Niners had multiple deals for you that they were willing to accept, according to sources. And they nixed them because you weren't willing to sign with that place. If you were willing to sign with the Cleveland Browns, how does it feel to know that the Niners would have traded your ass to the Colts? No, I don't know. Like, all that stuff is tough.
I think the media, for the most part,
I would also want to know about his decision to hold in. What made you decide that you would rather be at practice as opposed to taking the trend? Because you literally have another example of a guy that's doing a similar thing, only Williams isn't present. So I would ask about that too.
I heard Bill Belichick had something interesting to say about that. And Belichick said that he'd rather have his players hold in if he was dealing with a contract dispute as a head coach. That way he could keep an eye on him, knew what it is that they were doing, making sure that at least they were, lifting, throwing up some weights, doing the training. At least they were in camp and they were making the effort. And he felt as though he could keep, an eye on what it is that they were doing on a daily basis, as opposed if you're holding out. I don't know. What are you doing? Are you sitting on the couch, just crushing beers, eating whatever? Where are you? Where are you at? There was something to be said, he felt, when somebody was in the building.
See, I find that interesting because Belichick, as a Parcells disciple, strikes me as an old school guy that would essentially not want a distraction in the building or public. I believe that he means that. But I just feel like the way that Belichick approached the Patriots was my way or the highway. And if you're in, you're in. And if you're not, you're not. So if it's about money hold out, but do not be here, because if you are at the facility and you are at practice, I expect you to be in pads. And I also, I wonder how someone like Andy Reid has sort of dealt with this offseason, because one thing that flew under the radar amidst all these different negotiations and, mega money talks was the fact that the Chiefs have been going through negotiations with their own players. Certainly not to the profile of Brandon Aiyuk or CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase, who I think has been in and out of practice with the Bengals. But their players have been practicing, even during contract negotiations. And I found it interesting, Dan, that that's the team that won the Super Bowl. Those are the players that understandably would want to get paid for their production and their assistance in winning a Super Bowl. And they're at practice and they're on the field. Meanwhile, other players, and I don't mean to single out Aiyuk, this is the case. You can make the case for Chase, case for a few other players, that they're at the facility, they want their money, they didn't win a Super Bowl, and they are a distraction.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is Patrick Mahomes at the end of the day, because we always have this different set of rules for the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, they play their players in the preseason. Well, you can't argue against that because they win Super Bowls. Or they do it this way in terms of handling their players. Well, they win Super Bowls. I think all of that is Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes wasn't there, and you were just another a pedestrian-type football team, then none of this stuff is applicable. Just getting back to Bill Belichick, do you think has he lost a bit of his edge now that he's gone into the media? He just seems more like, obviously he's aware of the camera and he's got to be more affable. I just feel as though there's a term called jump the shark, which a lot of people use incorrectly.
Something about Fonzarelli?
Oh my God, only you, man. Only you. So this gets back to Happy Days, where they did this. Fonzie was this, I didn't watch a lot of Happy Days, but Fonzie was this sort of pseudo gangster, and he was like, it's the 1950s, so he's sort of this hood, but also friends with Potsy.
Like a Grease character.
Yeah. But there was this one episode, and he was always sort of the cool dude with these sort of minimal lines and sort of the hard guy. But there was this one episode, as they were obviously losing an audience, and it was like in their 10th year, what have you, where they're in Los Angeles, and they decided to put Fonzie on water skis, and he's going to jump this shark in the Pacific Ocean. And it just was like this episode where Happy Days had clearly lost its edge. And it's like, what happened to Fonzie? He used to be this grease monkey who was sort of this hard character. Now he's jumping a shark in the Pacific Ocean with his black leather jacket. Like, we've gone soft. We've lost whatever edge we might have had.
So it wasn't even implied in the episode. People just took it and ran with it.
Exactly. And I think that what happened to Bill Belichick is that he was once this guy who didn't give a rip about the media, that he was this monosyllabic, I'll give you a word or two and then I'm moving on, which was sort of his character. And now we see this from time to time where he gets in front of the media, and now he signed a contract with ESPN. Now he's become this loquacious and sort of affable, and now he's got a sense of humor, and he's going back and forth with Pat McAfee. I'm like, I don't know. Give me the crusty guy that was just sort of all about winning football games.
Yeah, he used to be cold as ice, and now you're calling him the Wicked Witch of the West. He's just melting. Like he just can't find a way to summon that inner, that Belichick, that he wasn't even confrontational in a way that was intimidating. Like you're talking about Holmgren. Like Holmgren, I don't know, there's just something. Maybe it's the appearance, just, I don't know, the presence about him that felt intimidating. I don't think Belichick ever felt intimidating to me, but he just wouldn't let you in. And so I do think that the guy that he is now is who he is. It's part of him. Like I think he's an affable dude. I like Belichick. Even when he was talking about just on to Cincinnati, I still found it entertaining.
I think somewhere in between the two lies the real Belichick. I think a lot of guys, when they get on camera, Saban to a certain degree as well. Saban was, you talk about nasty interviews, he would go after you. Because if you're in Tuscaloosa, he owns, not only does he own Alabama football, he owns the city, he owns the state. He's the highest paid employee in the state. It's, when you talk about Alabama, it's synonymous with one man. He's as powerful as the governor. So you're not asking him difficult questions. And he was pretty cruel to the media. And that was sort of who he was. It was just I'm sitting here and I'll dictate what it is that we're talking about. Don't ask me any tough questions. You know who the hell I am? And now he's in front of a mic and a camera, and suddenly he's got a big smile on his face, and he's this nice guy. Like, come on, man. We're jumping the shark a little bit.
Well, I don't think that's who Saban is, but I think Belichick is being himself. I mean, Saban's a red ass. Like, let's just be honest. That guy seems, like someone who I don't know if I would want to carry a conversation with for too long if it wasn't about football.
What do you think of Tom Brady? Are you excited to hear and see what it is that Tom Brady, and as far as a color analyst in his first Fox football game?
100%, and I think he'll be good. The one thing that is kind of...
I think you're going to go down the same road that I am.
It's really straight, because so he has part ownership in the Raiders.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
And...
access to the team.
He can't talk to teams, which is a big part of preparation if you're a color analyst. I don't care how old you are, how removed you are from the game. I think one of the reasons why I always felt like Dan Fouts was one of my favorite color commentators is because it felt like he knew the locker room. It felt like he, even though he hadn't played for years, was still able to connect with the players on the field and bring that to the telecast. I don't know if Brady's going to be able to do that because he legally doesn't have the ability to talk. Ken, you have more.
Yeah, I was going to say he also can't really rip into the refs. I was telling Evan, earlier this week, I was like, yeah, he's got to, he could say that was a bad call, but he can't dive any further.
Why?
Again, because of the tuck rule.
Good call. That's a 4. No, he can't get it because I think it goes against his ownership policy.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess he.
And the players, when you do those meetings, I've never been in one, but they always say that it's unlike a post-game interview where you're talking to, say, a Brock Purdy, or you're talking to a Deebo Samuel, and they're just sort of giving you,
yeah, fluff.
Yeah. When you're talking about these guys and you have access to them prior to a game and they come into this conference room, they disclose a lot, and they're very glib about what it is that they're saying.
So the reason why I'm excited to hear Brady, and I don't know, it might get old fast. Who knows? It might jump the shark. The number one Fox team. I think it's Kevin Burkhardt.
Burkhardt.
Yeah, he's taking over for Olsen, who, by the way, had to take a $7 million pay cut.
Wow.
That stinks. But Brady is somebody that I'm looking forward to hearing because unlike even someone as good as Romo, I think Romo is probably the best player of the current color commentators. Like his career was the best up until Brady steps into the booth. Brady, anytime he criticizes a player, has that right. And I have to listen to him. And I have to give credence to what he's saying. I have to at least think about why he's talking about a player the way he is. Or if he's heaping praise on him. One of the reasons I really like watching the Manning cast is because Peyton Manning will be critical of quarterback play. Eli Manning, less so. That's just not really who he is. I think he's just kind of a laissez-faire guy, and I really enjoy him. But Peyton Manning will be critical of decisions. He'll be critical of clock management. He'll be critical of things that he was cerebrally aware of in a cerebral fashion on the field at all times. And so when he is saying something, even if I disagree in the moment, I'm like, oh, well, Peyton Manning's thinking about that. That forces me to think about that. I think Brady can bring that to the booth.
Well, I would say that the Manning cast is a little bit different because it's not as conventional, and that's not the actual broadcast of the game. I think the Manning cast, much like that of a podcast, much like that of a show like this, you can be much more opinionated. Right? And you can go after people, as we often do, as the Mannings are allowed to do. When you're actually calling the game and you're the number one team and you're the analyst and the play-by-play guy, I think you have to be you can't be as voiceful and you can't be as critical of players. As,
my bad. Sorry. Aikman. Aikman's the best former player. That's a color analyst right now.
He's amazing. Collinsworth is good as well, although a lot of people don't like him. But yeah, Aikman's spot on. I think it's very different from what the Mannings do than what it is that Tom Brady is about to embark on. That I think you have to, you can't be as critical of players as maybe in another format like that of the Manning cast. I have no idea because we just don't know his style. Yeah, theoretically, he should know what he's talking about, and I'd listen to him. But it's just, you know this, man. It just depends on whether he can pick his spots. He's easy to listen to. He gets in, he gets out. He's not stepping on the other guy's toes. That it all sort of works in terms of a team. Like that's so nuanced that we won't know until we actually see him in his first broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, the technical aspect of, look, I think color commentating is the most difficult position in broadcasting. And, you know, I'd like to think play-by-play is pretty hard. I do it. I know how difficult it is. But someone that is a color commentator does not get to choose when they start talking and when they end. They have a confined amount of space that is dictated by, you know, a graphic, by a package, by the play-by-play commentator. If you have a guy that talks a lot, well, then you get 8 seconds really to explain everything that just happened and you got to get out. Or it might be working with a partner that is relatively soft-spoken and you have to fill a ton of time. You know, Collinsworth, like, I think one of the reasons I liked him with Michaels is because Michaels just kind of got out of the way. It felt like Collinsworth drove the broadcast and there was more of a forum for him to speak his mind on whatever was happening during the play.
Yeah, and Aikman and Buck have a really good rapport with one another. And I think it's when Collinsworth, yeah, he's a little bit more dominant, but when Aikman speaks, it's like E.F. Hutton, you listen. It's usually really spot on. It's informative. It's poignant. What happens is with a lot of analysts is they talk for the sake of talking. And I always tell you this, that less is more. And sometimes the guy that lays out and doesn't say anything after a certain play because there isn't necessarily anything to add, that they don't feel as though they're obligated, as though I have to say something, those are usually the guys that know what's up and are good at what it is that they do. And I don't know where Tom Brady, it's actually really good. I don't know if we can talk about, the station he's on, but FP Santangelo, I think I've told you this, as a color guy, is really good. As an analyst in baseball, on radio, he just knows when to pick his spots. He's usually, as a former player, has really good insight. And he's got a sense of humor, but he doesn't dominate. There's times when I'm driving around and I'm going from point A to point B, and I'm not even sure if he's on the call because he won't say anything for a good stretch. But when he does talk, it's usually worth, listening to.
Well, I think that's probably also because he's got a decade of experience as a television color commentator with the Washington Nationals. So he's been in the booth for quite some time. On the other side, I do want to, again, I want to get back to this idea of what, I don't know, like the blank check thing has been kind of consuming me, Dan. And you said something earlier in the segment that I want to use to transition, because the other piece of news that sort of leaked out this week in regards to contracts was about Steph Curry. And I think it flew under the radar because it was expected, it was a large sum of money, it was deserved. But that is truly the one blank check athlete, I believe, that resides in the Bay Area is Steph Curry. And I think it was significant for a couple of reasons. And I think it also sets up a bit of a domino effect for the remainder of the Warriors offseason. We can dig into that on the other side. We can also get back into, how we feel about particular broadcast crews, how they impact our viewing experience, and also right now where you're at with the San Francisco 49ers. So the form is yours on the other side as we move into our final hour here on Saturdays on 95.7 The Game. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone. 888-957-9570 is the number. Also the number for the Xfinity mobile text line. We're back after this.
This is the day of the big sale at your gift shop.
Welcome in.
So this isn't just a big day for your business. It's a big day for...
long as you're living in my house, I'm going to give you hell. Nothing good will come to you.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
Who's that?
Oh, one of our loyal listeners. Come on, Devone. We got P1s out here. If anyone want to call in, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone with you. I'll tell you the strangest thing in sports that I've seen in the last month. And it's not about Brandon Aiyuk. It's not about Trent Williams. It's not about Steph Curry. It's not even about the San Francisco Giants who still have a chance to make the playoffs, 1.3%. It was last night at Stanford Stadium. So I went down for the home opener to check out the Cardinal. Shout out my boy PL and his lovely family. Helped me get in the building. And I look at the gorgeous green grass, naturally grown with a lot of 4.0 students just trampling all over it. And then I look towards the corner and I see some spray paint. And together it says ACC. It is the strangest. I completely forgot the Pac-12 was dead, and I hated looking at ACC on the Cardinal field as they kick off against TCU. It just didn't feel right, Dan.
It's the ultimate contradiction when you talk about the NCAA and money, right? Because it's all about them having a hard time swallowing NIL because of all the money being allocated to its players. And that these are higher learning institutions. And probably the most egregious of all of this, and the most obvious that we are doing this for one reason and one reason only, and that is money. Forget about the fact, bad enough for football teams having to travel to the East Coast. Think about the gymnastic teams. Think about the lacrosse teams. Think about all baseball teams having to go back and play, you name it, out Virginia for a 4-game series in the middle of the spring. Like that logistically in terms, I mean, this is professional sports. That's what professional athletes do. Sorry to go off on the tangent, but
you're not looking for
says ACC, then the fog on the Golden Gate Bridge as we zero in on the University of California in today's football game.
Who, by the way, kicks off against UC Davis. I think it's on ACC Network Extra. Or I don't know, whatever their ESPN Plus version is.
People out in that part of the Northeast are like, UC Davis? The hell is that?
What do you mean? You're not looking forward to seeing the Wolfpack come to town? I mean, NC State's going to be in Berkeley this year, Dan.
That's so ridiculous.
Cal's going to Pitt. They're going to Florida State. They'll be invading Tallahassee.
That'll be fun, actually.
Taking their tomahawks with them. Probably 30-point dogs.
USC and LSU today.
Oh, that's right. And then other teams are in the Big Ten. Well, the only reason I was thinking about this is because I was calling a Santa Clara volleyball match yesterday. And it was, I don't know.
Who was the libero?
On which team?
I don't know, Stanford's.
Oh, no. So this was Santa Clara. I drove up after the volleyball match to see the Stanford football game.
Do you know what a libero is there, Jersey Ken?
Enlighten me.
Enlighten him.
He asked you. All right,
so volleyball. You called the action last night.
The libero is the player on the court who is wearing a different colored jersey.
Yep.
And there are particular substitution rules that do not apply to the libero, who I believe can enter and exit. It's like you have 15 substitutions, I don't know, per set. There's a rotation and players come in and out at certain times, and you have to get particular players off the court, but those don't apply to the libero. And so the libero is generally like a defensive specialist.
Does all. Do everything.
I mean, they don't collect kills. They don't hit. They're not attacking players primarily, but they're a little bit smaller. They're quick, middle of the court. They can set up passes. They can dig balls out. And that's generally what a libero does. You're welcome, Ken.
So you a utility guy.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, the one last night was a former all-freshman performer for Santa Clara. My point is that...
Sorry.
No. So, where was I going with this?
I just completely screwed you. By the way, that's what they do on Bill Maher's podcast when he's stoned throughout the entire interview.
I swear I'm not stoned.
With Quentin Tarantino. It's just every 10 seconds. What was I talking about?
What is going on here?
I don't know, Bob. I don't know, Fitz. Who, by the way,
you were calling the game last night. Oh, you were at the Stanford game?
Yeah, so I went to the Stanford game. I saw the ACC, which was just off the right. I just did not like it whatsoever.
And we talked about
it'll come back
Florida
to me at some
State.
point. Oh, that's right. Yeah, so I was. We have a pregame segment, right? It's sponsored, and they say, hey, we got to talk about the standings. Well, it's the first match of the season. There are no standings. So we got to talk about the coaches poll. So I'm reading a couple days before about the, where Santa Clara ranks and, Pepperdine and LMU and USD and all these fantastic volleyball programs. And I see a quote from the coach about the new teams in the conference. And so I'm like, wow, the WCC is expanding. Maybe it helps them. I don't know, their package deal. I'm looking forward to because I'm going to be on ESPN and all the rest and blah, blah, blah. And then I see the two teams are Washington State
and Oregon State.
And Oregon State. They have joined the West Coast Conference for volleyball. I'm not sure about the rest of the sports, but we got Pac-12 ties now. And I was just like, what does this world come to?
What is the football team? Are they going to play each other 15 times? So did they go to the Mountain West for a year?
I think they're in the Pac-2. No, I'm honestly not sure.
I want to say they're in the Mountain West for a year. And then they're going to somehow reassemble or put the Pac-12 back together.
Yeah, until they figure it out. I do think that there eventually will be a new Pac-12 or Pac-10, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the Big East reformed. It disintegrated and was one of the greatest college basketball conferences that ever lived. And then it eventually came back, and they were able to kind of cobble it back together. Some new teams, some older squads. And the Big East is now, I think, seen as pretty competitive. Villanova, by the way, back in the Big East. So, look, there's hope for college programs. But speaking of basketball, Dan, I was thinking about the Warriors because Curry received his 1-year, $62.6 million contract extension. I think a day preceding the Aiyuk deal coming down. I don't know if Aiyuk just took his lead from one Wardell, but he gets the max, and that's the only thing he can sign for is 1 year. There's a rule, I think, that after age 35, you can't sign more than a 1-year contract extension, or you can't have a contract longer than 3 years at that age. So he gets his max. And I'm thinking about, why is it significant for the Warriors? Because if I just asked you this offseason, like, is Curry going to sign his extension? I'm assuming your answer would be yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be age 37 or 38. He's going to make more money in a single season than he ever has. And I think the Warriors are happy to give him the blank check that we've been talking about for the past couple hours. But I also...
It's not blank. There's a number on it.
Well, but whatever the largest number he could sign for, that's what he was going to get. If the max was $70 million, I think he would receive $70 million.
Because I think he's worth $100 million.
Well, according to the Warriors and their latest net worth evaluation, he's probably worth more than that. He's helped this team grow from a sub-billion-dollar franchise to one of the top 3 most valuable in the world. So, yeah, Curry's worth it. Curry's worth every single penny. Even though he might not be the player he was a couple of years ago, and certainly won't be that same player in a couple seasons, in my opinion. But I think it's significant for the Warriors because it does 2 things. First, I think it makes it easier for the Golden State Warriors to lure or try and attract another big-name star. I'm not going to use the LM word, but another big-name star to Golden State. That's first. Secondly, and more importantly, the last 2 seasons for the Warriors entering the year have had members of the Big 3 and their contracts be questions and storylines and, quite frankly, distractions the entire year. It was Draymond 2 years ago, and whether he was going to opt out or opt in and what he was trying to get. And there were questions about it. And, of course, I think it impacted maybe the way he handled himself off the court. Last season clearly impacted Klay Thompson, and we've now found out the reason why, because there was not a two-way street with him and the Warriors. Curry, by signing this extension, relieves us of all of those conversations. We don't have to have them anymore, and we don't have to ask him what his future is going to be. Because if he doesn't sign that extension by October 21st, which is the deadline, then every single time there is a bit of a valley in the Warriors' roller coaster ride of a regular season, people are going to bring up the question, well, what are they going to do with Steph? Well, now we know what they're going to do with Steph. He's going to be a Warrior, and he's going to be one, hopefully, for the remainder of his career.
Well, that's because he's Steph Curry. And when you talk about Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, those are good players. I wouldn't even consider Steph Curry a player at this point when you're talking about contract and negotiations. He is symbolic of the franchise. He's emblematic of who that team is, who the NBA has been, quite frankly, over the last 10 years. He takes on a whole nother persona. Like the idea of re-signing Steph Curry, no brainer isn't even an apt description from so many different levels, especially when you're talking about the finances as it relates to Joe Lacob. Because nobody prints money globally like that of Steph Curry. And the minute Steph Curry is no longer with the Warriors, the minute he takes off that uniform or the talk that, oh, he wants to play with a winner, and should he go somewhere else, the other uniform he puts on, suddenly they get all that merch revenue. They get all that TV menu. They get all that money that's allocated to just one man that you can't really even quantify at the end of the day. So when you talk about Steph Curry, you're talking about truly one. I want to dust off that guy who wrote the article. This is why I said a couple of weeks back.
You out there listening?
That this is an athlete that is one of the greatest to ever do it. And I mean that across the board in any sport. And I don't mean just respective in terms of what he does on the floor, but the reason why I mentioned Muhammad Ali and Steph Curry, it's because of what it is that he does and the way he conducts himself as a person off the court. Like there have been better basketball players. You could say Michael Jordan's better than Steph Curry, but nobody has been, well, Jordan's been a pretty good ambassador, but I don't think there's anybody. But Jordan was there's never been any warts on Steph Curry. He didn't have this little gambling thing that he went through a couple of years, right? He never said like Republicans wear shoes too. He's evaded all of that. Like he's so rare in terms of an athlete who's in the top 10 in the respective sport and then off the court doing everything the right way. And what does that mean for the franchise and the team you're playing for? It means money, because men, women, and children and people who are marginal sports fans are going to buy your jersey, going to go to your games, going to watch games to follow Steph Curry. So when you talk about re-signing him, I don't even think you can compare and contrast to a Draymond Green, to a Klay Thompson. Those are all good players, all part of the foundation that's been this winning franchise over the last decade. But when it comes to Steph Curry, it's a completely different planet as far as what it is that he means not only to the Warriors, but I think generally speaking to the sport itself.
No, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're saying, and I don't think there is a better ambassador. The only other one that I could think of would be LeBron. But I think Curry showed us during the Olympics just who the heart of Team USA was. It's him. But I also think it's important because, again, it alleviates a distraction for this season. And if the Warriors are to truly be better than they were last year, which the front office indicates they believe they can, then there can't be extra stuff not having to do with basketball. You know, there can't be off-the-court issues and people pouting, people talking about roles, people asking questions about futures. And that, I guess, all is, going to be dictated by the win-loss record. If the Warriors start 10-15, maybe it comes up. But I just feel like at the beginning of the year, if he had not signed the extension, that's what everybody would be wondering. Would Steph Curry consider not retiring a Golden State Warrior? And I think he values wearing one jersey for his entire career. And that's another thing it told me also, and why he is different. Now, I don't believe he's perfect, but I feel like I know what he values. And staying with a franchise for the entirety of his career is something I believe he holds close.
The way I interpret it is that, yes, winning championships are important to him, but what it is that you just laid out is even more so. And that is he's acutely aware in terms of his legacy and what it is that Kobe did. And you can name on one hand the athletes that have played for one team, and he wants to be one of those. And not only that, and he'll never admit this, and you might disagree, but I said this all along, before he signed that contract that he's not all about winning championships. That if the Golden State Warriors are competitive next year, they can get to the playoffs, maybe steal a series, that's good enough for Steph. The idea that I have got to go out with another ring and this whole concept of you can't do that to Steph. How many times have I heard that? This isn't fair to Steph. Listen, he understands where the Warriors are at. And the Warriors aren't winning another title in the next 2 years. It's just not happening. I'm sorry. I hate to deflate that bubble, but and it wasn't going to happen with Paul George. It wasn't going to happen with Lauri Markkanen. I think that Steph recognizes where the team is at. It's in a bit of a reset, rebuild, however it is that you want to phrase it. But Steph is also telling everybody that he's ensconced in the area. He's part of the Bay Area. His kids live here. They've grown up here. He's not going anywhere. Just do me a favor and don't make me Kobe the last 4 years of his career where you were a lottery team and you were a joke in L.A. Can we just be competitive?
Well, I mean, look, I would push back on that. First and foremost, the reason why those Kobe teams were as bad as they were is, Kobe tore his Achilles. He wasn't a very good player down the stretch of his career because of injury. Curry, knock on wood, has not had a career-altering injury like that. And as long as he doesn't, I feel pretty good about his ability to stay at a high level. I would push back on him not having a standard, as far as winning is concerned. I think if he didn't believe that the Warriors couldn't be competitive, and
do you think he believes they can, in his heart of hearts, they can win the title next year?
No, not as currently constructed. I don't believe that he thinks that. But by signing this contract, he also gives the Warriors more time to try and maneuver to put pieces around him to compete for a championship. I think the Warriors, look, if they start hot, maybe there is somebody that becomes available at the deadline. I think that they haven't pushed all their chips in yet as far as trade pieces. I'd be curious to see what they do with Kuminga this offseason, who's eligible for a contract extension. I think the way that they have pushed Brandon Podziemski on seemingly everyone in the media is very interesting as far as how highly they value him. And the piece that Slater wrote, I think it was last week, about how Podziemski had gotten confirmation from Dunleavy and Lacob that he was not going anywhere this offseason. I think that means the Warriors value him highly. I think it's a bit premature, but they clearly do. They still have trade chips to use, and they haven't cashed them in yet. And I think that Curry, by signing that 1-year deal, is doing all the things we're talking about. He wants to be a one-team player. I think he wants to cement his legacy. I think he still wants to compete. But he also is giving the Warriors a little bit more time to get help around him. I don't think he's satisfied with the Kobe riding off into the sunset just with a 25-win basketball team.
Well, no, I said he doesn't want to be Kobe. I think what he wants the Warriors to do is to maybe give the outside chance that we could win this thing as a long shot, but just be competitive. Let's get into the playoffs and be a good team. Let's not be a lottery team. I think Steph recognizes he's getting older, he's slowing down, but the idea that you're going to get a player in here, or that you're going to be able to bring in a couple of players and we're going to be a championship type team. Looking at the landscape of the Western Conference, I think he realizes that that's not going to happen. But as you get older, it just becomes more a quality of life. That's as important as anything, if not more so. And then we sort of mischaracterize and misjudge a lot of this, that Steph is all about winning a title, that he may get up and go. He may go to wherever because he wants to win that championship. Yeah, same with LeBron. It's true. But you know what? LeBron, at the end of the day, he's like, I want to win titles, but I'm cool in Brentwood, brother. I'm cool having my production company and being in Los Angeles and all my ties to Hollywood. That also means something. Do I want to win a title? Sure. But some of these other things in life now have become almost on par with winning. And I know Steph wants to win. That's what drives these guys. It's what gets them out of bed in the morning. That's why they're as good as they are. Does he want to win a title? Yeah, but as the older you get, you begin to recognize, my kid wants to go to whatever, Monte Vista High School, and I don't want to leave, for 4 months of the year or 6 months of the year and play basketball and not be here in San Francisco and the Bay Area and watched them grow up. Whatever it is, I think quality of life really factors in now more so than maybe in years past.
But I also think he's realistic. Like winning a chip at all costs is not the most important thing to him, but it isn't as if it's not a really, really important thing. He wants to win every single year, but he's realistic that you can't. I mean, even some of the greatest Warriors teams he's been a part of have not won championships. So I think he gets it. He gets it in a way that a lot of athletes don't. And in doing that, he has made himself, that's where he separates himself in my mind from LeBron. He's not a guy that jumps ship. He's not a guy that throws teammates or coaches under buses. He's not a guy that gets people fired. He's not a guy that will come out and talk bad about an individual. He won't go at media members. He's just different. And that's why he is the ambassador that you believe is on the same par with some of the most historical figures in sports.
I'm trying to think of like an athlete. Who can you think of off the top of your head? Because Muhammad Ali was certainly controversial. Let's stop with the comparisons between him and Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, that's a whole nother show for another time. But as far as quote unquote doing it the right way, keeping your nose clean and just being a good guy, as well as being one of the best at your sport, who would you compare him to? I don't think there's anybody else out there, quite frankly.
For their entire career? I mean, well, first of all, there's just not a lot of players of his caliber that have been with the same team for as long as he has. They got Duncan, but Duncan didn't play in the same market with the same set of eyes that Curry did. But I think he's similar. I'm only really familiar with the tail end of his career. Elway, maybe. And the fact that he also was a part of the Broncos front office indicates just how much they value him in Denver. But Denver's not a market like the Bay Area. So I do think that it's more difficult for Curry to navigate that space.
Yeah, but even Elway began, again, if you were to compare him to Steph Curry, who has no blemishes on the resume, Elway was drafted by the Baltimore Colts and refused to go. Like, I don't want to play in Baltimore. He was the first guy to say, he was sort of Eli Manning before Eli Manning was drafted by out of the Chargers, remember? And he said, no, we're not going there.
Well, that was his dad.
His dad, but also,
Yeah.
And I think Elway was very similar in that I'm not going to Baltimore. Why? I don't want to play there. And so, he got his way. So there's nothing wrong with that. My point being is that, again, you can't find any of that with Steph Curry. Like, there's none of that in his career, both on and off the court.
Well, if you can think of anyone, we're taking your calls, we're taking texts on the other side. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone. We'll be back with our final segment, taking up until noon, right here on Saturdays on 95.7 The Game.
The hold-in is over.
Purdy looking in zone, lets it rip, and he's got a touchdown to Brandon Aiyuk.
Sometimes you wake up, Evan, you sound a little bit groggy.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
You got me, Filmo. You got me. I don't know if he was listening right at 9 a.m., but look, me and Devone are working on 3 hours of sleep each. Let's just come out and say, let's tell the people what's going on. This is an honest forum, an honest place. We're all family here. I'm gassed.
What were you doing last night?
Well, I'm not going to tell you what I was doing. I'm just going to tell you how much sleep I got. No, well, so it started yesterday. So Ken also knows this because he was in on the morning show. I was filling in for Bonte. So we get here at, an ungodly hour. We're up before the Roosters. And I roll in here about 5 a.m. or something like that. Wake up at 4. Do the show. Stick around through Steiny and Guru. Had a really fun show yesterday as well. Ken actually was there until 2 o'clock. Then I drive immediately down, grab some lunch on the way, drive down to Santa Clara, call this Santa Clara volleyball game that I was telling you about. And then I drive up to Stanford Stadium to catch the first half of the Cardinal TCU. Really good game. ACC opener. Disgusting. And then I drive up to Nopa, north of the Panhandle, this little neighborhood in the city. And I kick it with a few of my friends up until, wee hours or whatever. And then we go out to Coal Valley and we get into some trouble, and then I go back home. And, I don't know about you, Devone. I can't just shut it down immediately. Like, my body was still running on its third and fourth winds. And so I'm up, and now I'm right here with you because I have to get up at about 6:30.
You know what Paris Hilton says? Nothing good happens after 2 a.m., my man.
Is she the only one that says that? Wait,
so where are you rolling after?
What's your excuse?
Well, where were you rolling after Nopa?
Finnegan's Wake.
That's a bar.
Yeah.
Finnegan's Wake?
A pub.
After hours?
Well, it shuts down at 2.
Okay.
But
Finnegan's Wake.
Oh, by the way, that is home court. Anybody who plays pool, anybody who shoots pool, that's home court for your boy. I will take on anybody there.
Are you playing for a little money online, or are you just?
No, I'm broke.
By the way, when we talk about local football, so you're a big Cal fan, right?
Yes.
So my sisters went to Cal. Cal's probably the one football team that if you said, do you have an allegiance to? Like, no matter where I am in the country or wherever, I'll check and see what Cal did. Like, I wouldn't consider myself a fan of any other sport for whatever reason. Maybe it's because my sisters went to school there, and I bought into Oski when I was a kid, and the whole football fandom, when it has your.
By the way that Oski walks is just one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. He holds his hands behind his back.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of drags his feet like he's in Dune 2 and he's sand walking. I mean, Oski's just, I'm sorry. I love Cal. I love the Golden Bear. But Oski, brother, we got to work on your posture.
That's all part of it. So whoever the new Oski is, that's all part of the.
That's all I've known my entire life.
That wasn't one particular Oski that sort of like you saw for a 3-year run?
Since I've been going to Cal football games, and I don't go every single year, whoever is in that Oski uniform, I don't know if it's the same person or probably different people. I think they have a rotating, cast of members that infiltrate that suit, and they all walk like that, and they all hold their hands behind their back like they're up to no good.
Maybe it's part of the Yogi Bear persona, sort of that friendly bear. Maybe that's part of the problem, why they've been so crappy. Get an angry grizzly out there. But I digress.
Start paying people.
There is one player that has captivated my interest. That'll happen from time to time when it comes to Cal football, which I am partial to. And of all the teams, including the Niners, the Giants, the Warriors, if you were to ask me, what is the one team that you're a legitimate fan of? It's been Cal football throughout my entire life. If there's one player that I'm like, wow, that's brought back some spark, and I hope they do well as I do every year, but I am really curious to follow one Fernando Mendoza. Starting quarterback.
Their quarterback? That out of every Cal athlete that has ever walked through the Memorial Coliseum gates, Mendoza?
Well, no, this year I've got there's a lot of there's a litany of players that I'm huge fans of, but right now
they still got
over recent memory where there's a player I'm like, that's like, you got to hear this kid. First of all, he's brilliant. I want to say he's an Ivy League transfer. He's so smart. And he's got a twinkle in his eye where he's got a big personality and he's got the Cuban roots. It's just like it's a cool story. I'm just saying, man, bye Fernando Mendoza.
When I seen him throw that ball, I was like, oh my God.
All I know is he's gonna be running for his life week 4 when they go to Tallahassee against Florida State. I honestly, look, I don't have super high hopes for Cal football, but I do have a couple of suggestions from our previous conversation about like exemplary athletes, because we were talking about Curry, what he means. I think this is a really good one from the 408, the Xfinity mobile text line. Roger Federer, an exemplary athlete.
It's tennis.
Okay, first,
what are we doing here?
I'm going to fight you in a minute.
I know.
510, Tim Duncan. 510 also, Cal Ripken. I think that's a good one.
Mendoza went to Yale. He transferred from Yale. Go ahead. Sorry. How many people go from Yale to Cal? And he's from Miami, so he's got that Cuban background.
Do we know he's Cuban?
Yes.
Do we know that?
Better be.
Do we know that for a fact? But the one that caught your ear during the break, and thanks to our YouTube chat as well for the suggestion, was Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
Better comparison to Steph on off court than
that's a good stick.
Than Elway.
But I think as we talked about, he didn't revolutionize the sport like that of Steph. Like you can say Steph in terms of 3-point shooting. Nobody did it like him.
No, but I do think that the market matters, and there's no bigger market in the country than New York, and there's no bigger brand in sports outside of maybe the Cowboys than the New York Yankees. And you can make the case the Yankees are bigger just because they've been around for longer. They've won a lot more.
But if I was really to get technical about it, he got into that fight with A-Rod. They used to be best friends, right? This is the reason why A-Rod went to the Yankees. It's like our dream was to play on the left side of the infield together. And A-Rod's like, yeah, I want to play there so bad, I'll actually give up shortstop, my natural position, to play third base, to play alongside you. And then it got to the point where those two didn't speak to each other until just recently. I want to say over the last year.
They're hosting Fox pre- and post-game shows together. I think they're doing okay.
They came together. But there was you don't have any of that with Steph, I mean, I know I'm nitpicking here because Derek Jeter was the exemplary sort of.
Well, when he tries to trade Draymond this season, we might look at him a little bit differently.
But Steph has never been. I mean, he gets along with his teammates. You can bring in, you can bring in Kevin Durant. It's fine. Whoever. That's what I mean. He's so rare that whoever it is that you put up there, I'm sure if I dug a little bit more, there's some warts on Federer that we're not aware of that Curry's not privy to.
Well, I mean, his skin is clear as day.
Federer?
Oh, yeah.
That's scary, man.
Yeah, 0 warts. All right, let's get out to Gene in Oakland. He's been hanging on patiently, wants to talk about Steph. Gene, how are you?
I'm fine, fellas. So, look, I wanted to say something about Steph. First of all, I agree. They really had no choice. They had to sign him to this. He's the face of the team. He's just worth that much in my mind. He's the greatest warrior ever, and on my top 10, best of all time list. And I go all the way back to the beginnings of Bill Russell. So I've seen a lot of greats. But there's a couple of concerns I think that we all should have, and I think you touched on them already, Dan. First of all, the fact that $62.5 million is going to limit our chances to get some real help around him. I think he is, I think he realizes, as he said, that the chances of getting a championship are very slim. But he just wants a competitive team. But that's going to, that's going to impact our chances of doing that. So we're going to have to hope for, the young fellows to develop to a point where at least they're competitive and, a playoff team at that time. The other concern I have is this, and you also touched on it. Curry's getting older, and he's, even in the last couple of years, you could see him slowing down. Second half of this last season, he was good. He was not great. So, because he's getting older, and what he does on the court really is something that no man at his age has ever done before, even in his mid-30s. So what are we going to see at age 39? And here's my concern along with that. I have two of the greatest sports icons in my mind, in my sports history. The first is Willie Mays. And I remember the catch and throw in '54.
Vic Wertz.
I saw it. a couple of years after that. I'm that old. And it left an indelible, image in my mind. He became the greatest player of all time, right, from that point on. But then I fast forward to 72 when he was with the Giants, and I remember this sad image of Willie trying to run out for a routine fly ball and being too slow to do it. So I felt at that point, if he'd only retired a year or two before, he could have gone out on top. I think I would have felt better about it. Second icon is Tiger Woods. All right, greatest golfer of all time, as far as I'm concerned. But look at what he's doing now. It's truly sad to see him, shooting 7 or 8 or 10 over par and not making cuts.
Hey,
once again, I wish he had quit. So I'm afraid I don't want to see that for Curry. Is what I'm getting at. I hope he has the presence of mind to know his limits, and if you can't play, more than 20 minutes, then please just don't do what these other athletes did. Those are my points.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate the call. He agreed with you.
There's an art to going out on top, and I don't think that's lost on Steph Curry. I don't think Steph Curry's going to be one of those guys hanging on.
But how many guys get to go out on top? Like, that's something that, look, okay, not everybody can be John Wayne, all right? No one is going to walk into the sunset after every single movie and sweep the woman off their feet, in this case, sweeping a championship off their feet and walk into the sunset. Like, even the greatest of greats don't get to do that.
Well, what I mean by that is that when he gave the example of Willie Mays, who I think retired at the age of 42 and finished his career with the New York Mets. And there was that World Series that the Mets were in against the Oakland A's. The A's won it in 72, 73, and 74. And Willie Mays was sort of embarrassing. And my point is that going out on top is that Steph Curry will recognize that when it's time to go, he will leave when he still has all his faculties in terms of the ability to shoot a three and still look like a good basketball player.
But I think that's also something athletes say they want to do, but don't actually follow up on. Like, I remember listening.
It's hard.
Well, yeah, to walk away it's something we know nothing about at that level. But I remember listening to an interview from the late, great Kobe Bryant, where he was talking about how he basically, he just said, like, do you think I'm going to hang around, an average 15, 17 points a game? And, do you think that I'm just going to, be a guy? No, like, if I can't be Kobe Bryant, I'm not going to be playing anymore. Okay, well, the last couple of years of his career, he was averaging like 17 to 20 points a game. Like, what I'm saying is that the competitor in these players does not allow them to just hang it up at the highest of highs, or at what they believe is enough of a peak for them. If Steph Curry wins, if the Warriors somehow miraculously win the championship this season, you think Curry would retire?
He should.
I beg to differ. I don't think it means he should, and I don't think he would.
No, he wouldn't. But I think that's the perfect opportunity. Like that's your. That's your Mike Eruzione or your opportunity, one of the few athletes just to go out on top after a title.
The most recent one that I can recall as far as being a franchise player that got to retire on top was Ray Lewis. His last game was against the Niners in the 2013 Super Bowl, 2012 Super Bowl.
I mean, it happens. I think the closest might be, and this is a bit of a stretch, is when you think of Tom Brady. It could have gotten a lot uglier had he stayed in New England. But we think about Tom Brady on the north side of 40 going out with a Super Bowl title with Tampa Bay. Now, the last 2 years?
His last season went 8-9.
Yeah, well, but do you think of that, or do you think of him and his winning a title with Tampa Bay the year prior?
Well, you think about the championship, but I think you think about the highest point for any athlete, no matter how they retire. Like, I don't remember Patrick Ewing retiring as a Seattle Supersonic.
Oh, that was gross.
I'm not going to remember Olajuwon in a Toronto Raptors jersey. I'm going to remember him giving the dream shake to David Robinson when he was in his prime. My point is that it's great to think about athletes winning a championship and then just setting sail. But I don't believe that most players can do that. Like, Tom Brady would have been smart to hang him up after he won his final ring with Tampa Bay. But the next year, I think he led the league in passing.
Yeah.
Like he still had a lot left in the tank.
Well, there was talk about him coming to San Francisco. Because remember, the 49ers were in flux for a quarterback. And that he was going to be that 1 year and come back home to San Mateo, and his dad was going to do it, or dad would drive down and watch game. I mean, I guess the reason I use Tom Brady as an example is that he was still on top of his game. Yeah, the 8-9 record wasn't impressive. And I think that's what you'll get from Steph Curry. He may not win a title. He may stay on a year too long as far as a one-loss record with the Golden State Warriors, but I don't think he's going to hang on where he's got 2 knee braces and can no longer be the Steph Curry that we've all known to grow and love. He's not going to be a guy that's just going to hang on until somebody taps him politely on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Steph, known you my whole life, bro. It's time to go."
Yeah, I mean, well, Ken, I don't know. Can you recall a particular athlete? And that's kind of why I mentioned Elway. Like, he did go out on top. The 510 is chiming in Peyton Manning, who retired after Super Bowl 50.
Yeah,
but that's when he was done.
That's what I was going to say, too, because Peyton Manning's kind of like the cross, the in-between, because his last year with the Broncos wasn't great, but he went out on top. Now, I don't know if that means, like, you know.
But it was time for him to retire. I think he threw 9 touchdowns to 17 picks that year.
He was wearing gloves on his hands at that point. So, yeah, no, it definitely was. It was just a good moment for him. And like you said, Tom Brady, I still think he went on top. You know, he could still have another couple of years in him. I think he still wants to play, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I think that sort of the medicine in terms of taking care of your body has really changed when you think about, I think the caller talked about Willie Mays and going back in the day, is that once you get to 40, it's not the end of your career. And these guys, the way Steph and LeBron maybe started this, the way they take care of themselves year round in terms of having a dietitian on your payroll and all the working out. Peyton Manning, though, he did it with 2 teams. So if we're really, again, splitting hairs when we're talking about Steph Curry with the Golden State Warriors throughout his entire career, I mean, Peyton in Indy and then going to Denver and winning a title, where we're sort of...
Well, and that's why like Ray Lewis was top of mind for me, because he was a Raven his entire career. I think he was also still pretty good towards the tail end, even though he was recovering from that tricep injury, but he was still a good player at the back end of his career. Peyton Manning, the best Broncos teams that he played on probably weren't the ones that won, or the best Bronco teams that he was like an elite quarterback. I mean, same with Indianapolis, So as far as being a one-team player...
Elway.
Yeah, that's Elway. I mean, Mahomes is probably the closest one currently going. I don't think there's much you can nitpick about Mahomes, the person.
No.
There hasn't been much that's been dusted off on him in a negative light. Yeah, and look, I'm willing to admit, I'm not that old. The 510 is saying Jim Brown retired on top as a champion, most valuable player in 64.
As a champion?
I'm not so sure. I'm not familiar with the 64 Browns. So
we looked at it. I don't think the Browns won it in 60. The Browns haven't won it. No. Maybe that's right.
Well, they were in the AFL. I don't know. But I think it's very rare. And that's why actually, I know it's an individual sport and you kind of poo-pooed it, but I do think Federer is someone that comes to mind, because Federer is not going to go down. And this is where I think he's similar to Steph. Steph, you brought up, is not the greatest player of all time, but he might be the greatest ambassador of all time. I don't think Roger Federer will be seen as the greatest tennis player to ever walk the earth, but he might be the game's greatest ambassador ever. We saw a couple players recently that were retired that I think have a chance to be better than him. Djokovic, who lost yesterday at the U.S. Open, Alcaraz the day before. Alcaraz has a long way to go, but Djokovic is the best player I've ever seen. I wouldn't consider him nearly the ambassador that Roger Federer was. And there have been great champions, but to have that, I don't know, that just innate ability to lead and represent, not perfection, but greatness. I mean, it is rare.
I want to say I remember back in the Balco days where, everybody was being sort of outed. It was sort of like McCarthyism back in the day.
Willie Mays is probably the other one that the Bay Area has.
I want to say Federer was caught up in that there were allegations that Federer was on this list of people that were doing drug enhancing or performance enhancing drugs.
You're just gonna throw that out there?
No, we can look it up. I want to say that that he was again to my point.
Federer, steroids, and the '64 Browns.
Steph Curry is just he's never even come close to anything like that, which puts him again in such a rarefied position. Like he's just so clean, but not like a Tim Tebow clean, not an annoying clean. Not a Russell Wilson annoying clean. Not that religion makes you annoying, but I think that because he's a religious guy. I mean, he likes to have fun and he does his thing and he's a cool cat. He's identifiable, but he just, he does it the right way. And for a guy who's a top 10 athlete in his respective sport, I think you can count on one hand, and one of which is Steph Curry.
Yeah, I think Serena Williams probably is in that category as well.
Well, you're looking at his Federer in there?
Well, I'm just looking at like individual champions. Okay. Look, they don't have a chance to switch teams. They're playing on Team Williams or Team Federer, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, Curry's he's one of one, man, and he got his 1 year, $62.6 million extension. He's going to be a Warrior for the next couple of seasons. And I'm looking forward to that. I know that his powers will probably decline.
Oh, by the way, I know you follow this stuff. Did my man Tiafoe, did he win?
He did.
He did?
Yeah, he was down.
He beat the other American.
Yeah, she beat Shelton, which I was very disappointed in. I think Shelton's the best American we have. And Tiafoe came back and took him out. I think he was down one set. Shelton took the first. It's just, God, I could go on forever about our American tennis players. They're all flawed.
Are they?
They're all flawed.
Not according to McEnroe.
Well, none of them are McEnroe. None of them.
You can't be serious.
Well, maybe their personalities, but as far as their ability, we cannot find one to break through. The U.S. Open is the only opportunity we really have because by the end of the tennis calendar, all these guys are gassed. Djokovic is running out of steam. Alcaraz is running out of steam. Jannik Sinner's in it. Speaking of Balco, what?
You know how hot it is in New York right now?
I don't know, temperate.
I mean, it's like mid-90s, like when the Open, like 2 days ago. Can you imagine playing on concrete? I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it should favor a player like Ben Shelton, who is just an unbelievable forehand and a ridiculous serve. The guy puts more power into anything at 21 years of age than a lot of guys I've seen. He's probably got to go back to Roddick.
Physically put together as well.
Yeah, he's a big boy. He is a big boy. All right, Dan. Well, this has been fun, my man. Appreciate you.
Oh, are we done? I honestly thought we had a whole nother segment. I'm sorry. I would have finished with a bang rather than a whimper.
Well, you got 30 seconds. What do you got?
I don't know, man. I think that... I don't know.
I thought you were going to go Simone Biles.
U.S. Open.
Stick the landing.
Come on. With U.S. Open.
What's your hottest take from the week? Come on. I know you got it.
My hottest take of the week... Jets beat the Niners by 2 touchdowns. Come on, everybody.
Well, save that for next Saturday. We still got one more show before the Monday night opener, yes. And if you want to go back and listen to our 49ers conversation, we did get into it in the first hour. I swear to God, we talked about the Niners. We also got into the Warriors. And we also took about 5 seconds to talk about the San Francisco Giants. But it's always fun to work with you, Dan. I look forward to doing it again. Same place, same time, 9 to noon next Saturday.
This is the day of the big sale at your gift shop.
Welcome in.
So this isn't just a big day for your business. It's a big day for the network keeping it all connected.